Hello everyone, if you're new to my channel, consider liking and subscribing. It will make me feel wonderful if you do that. Thanks. By the way, I also have another Naruto and Luffy fanfiction channel. If you are interested, link is in the description.
Tomorrow's Romance Dawn, Old Version, by OtakuWithHazelEyes. The Straw Hats have left Drum, ready to take on Baroque works in Alabasta. However, upon making a pit stop at a mystery island, they come across something they never expected to find: an older Zoro. Now they must locate the future crew, as well as keep treasure out of the hands of bounty hunters. Adios.
Where'd she go? She was right there, I swear. Find her. She's worth a lot of berries, so we can't afford to let her go. Yeah, the boss will reward us for sure if we bring her and the treasure in. She remained high in the tree branches, waiting for her pursuers to leave. It was troublesome that the bounty hunters had followed them onto the island, but she had years of practice evading capture. Giving a group of expendable lackeys the slip was child's play at best. As she waited for the men to stop their search, she turned her attention to the matter at hand. She had to admit, the sudden nightfall was peculiar. It was the second one in the last 12 hours or so, and both times, the phase of the moon had been different. First a waning gibbous, then a waxing crescent. It was strange, going from day to night to day to night again. In fact, the island was strange as a whole, but that wasn't going to stop her. During her escape from the bounty hunters, she had heard an interesting tidbit of information while hiding behind a giant tree root. She liked these trees. They reminded her of the ones on Skypia. The lackeys spoke of finding a treasure, and had called this island Kala. If this truly was the legendary island of Kala, then there had to be some ruins somewhere. She could only imagine what she could learn here, given the chance. She might even be able to move forward in completing her dream, so she had to at least try. She could only hope, of course, that none of her friends had gotten themselves captured by bounty hunters or eaten by one of the freshwater sea kings. That would be unfortunate. They were probably fine, though. Hey, there she is. She's up in that tree. Oh, they had spotted her. She had been hoping to avoid a confrontation, but it looked like they weren't giving her a choice. Now, if only the bounty hunters would stop being so noisy. They were going to alert others of her position this way. She would have to remedy that. Clutch. Time. Night in the afternoon location, the Going Merry. Zoro-san, wait up, Luffy said, coming out of the galley door. Where are you going? The rest of the crew followed their captain out onto the deck as well. It was still night out, and the stars twinkled brightly in the sky. Roronoa was already halfway across the deck, heading directly for the railing. Luckily, he stopped his stride and turned to face the Straw Hats. I've wasted enough time here, he replied, resting one hand on his swords. Thanks for the food, but I really should be on my way. Why you're leaving? Chopper stuttered. You can't leave yet, your shoulder? Is not that big a deal. Roronoa finished for the reindeer. I'll have my crew's chopper look at it when I find him, okay? See ya. What do you mean, when you find him? Luffy asked, crossing his arms. Don't you know where your crew is? Roronoa had been in the process of turning to leave again, but halted. He sighed. No, I don't. We all split up to explore the island, except for the one crewmate who stayed behind to watch the ship. I went with someone, but he got lost. I need to go and find them now. I know they can usually handle themselves, but this time. Does it have anything to do with that triple pose? Vivi asked. You looked really grim when you saw it. Roronoa reached into his haramaki and removed the New World log pose, holding it up so everyone could see it. You see this? He asked. They all nodded. Good, it belongs to Nami. Yeah, you ripped it right out of her hands, Sanji said, sounding angry. Mosshead never did apologize. Not that Nami. Roronoa shouted, pointing at Nami. I meant my Nami. A look of sheer horror spread across Nami and Zoro's faces, and Sanji looked ready to faint dead away. Roronoa then realized how weird that had probably sounded. They didn't seriously think that. You numbskulls, I don't mean my as in, he groaned. I meant my crew's Nami, as in the one that's 20, not 18, we're not, we would never, geez. Zoro, Nami, and Sanji visibly relaxed. Luffy laughed, though he probably didn't even get what the problem had been. Thank heavens, Usopp said, wiping his brow in relief. Can you imagine how awkward that would have been? I don't get it, Chopper said, confused. Usopp patted his head. It's a human thing. Ahem. Vivi cleared her throat. Now that that's cleared up, you were saying, Mr. Bushido? The triple pose belongs to future Nami? Roronoa regained his composure and nodded. Yeah, it's the one she uses to navigate the new world. She never lets this thing out of her sight. He turned to his young captain. And you said you found it lying in the sand? Yeah, it was buried under the beach, Luffy replied. It's weird that Nami would just drop her log pose. Is she really forgetful in the future? You dummy, Nami sighed. I would never just drop my log pose. Exactly, Roronoa said. He tucked the log pose back into his haramaki. You wouldn't have lost this unless something happened to you. I did tell you bounty hunters were following us when my crew came here, and I don't need to be a genius to know they have something to do with it. Was one of these bounty hunters the one you fought in the jungle? You keep bringing up a witch or something, Sanji said. He thought for a moment. Was she pretty? Think with your head for once, Cook, Roronoa said flatly. How should I know if she was pretty? I was a little busy trying to keep from being decapitated to pay attention to something like that. I can tell you she was a swordsman, and a good one. You lost to a girl? Usopp snickered. That earned him a dirty look from Vivi and Nami, so he stopped snickering. I didn't lose, Zoro snapped. He paused. I mean, he didn't lose. He said some other hunter showed up and hit him with the tranks, right? Right, the older swordsman confirmed. I was winning that fight until he showed up. And don't underestimate a girl, Usopp. They can kick your rear just as easily as any man. But I digress. The point is that these people were nothing to sneeze at. The witch was fast enough to keep me on my toes, not to mention she had a real pain of a devil fruit ability. Literally. And the red-eyed freak with the tranks was clearly an experienced sniper. If there are more like them on this island, I have a feeling my crew is in for a rough time of it. So you want to find them and see if they're alright, Nami summarized. In a nutshell. I have faith in my crew's abilities, but this island is not natural. Anything can happen here. A slightly evil-looking grin came on his face. Besides, I owe that witch and red-eyed freak a rematch. It'd be rude not finish our fight, don't you think? That moron. Nami thought. All he's interested in is fighting strong enemies. I see your problem. You're missing your crew, and need to find them, Luffy said thoughtfully. He nodded. Okay then, we'll help you. No thanks, Roronoa said immediately. A stunned silence hit the Straw Hats. Don't you want to think about it? Vivi asked. Yeah, we can help you look, we don't mind, Chopper said. What he didn't say aloud was that he was curious in meeting his older self. I appreciate the offer, but I don't need help, Roronoa said. He turned to leave. It's best you all stay on the merry. Come on, Zoro-san. I want to find our crewmates too. Luffy said. We'll get to explore the Mystery Island and fight bounty hunters together. It'll be fun. Roronoa turned on his heel and glared at the rubber boy. Luffy, I don't mind if you're laid back most of the time, but I need you to take this seriously. This isn't a game. You know these kind of people can and will kill you, if given the chance. So it's okay for you to risk your life, but not us? Vivi asked. He gave her a look, as if you're one to talk, princess. Vivi flinched, but didn't retort. What did he mean by that? Guys, maybe he's right, Usopp said nervously. These bounty hunters sound really dangerous. It might be better for us if we remain here on the merry. It's okay, Usopp said, flexing his arm and grasping it to emphasize. I think we can take them. I'm with Luffy, Zoro agreed. He flicked one of his swords loose with his thumb. These bounty hunters sound like they'd be interesting to battle. I want to see how strong they are for myself. And I'm interested in seeing the lovely lady who gave future Mosshead a run for his money, Sanji added. Roronoa felt like tearing his hair out. How could they be so dense? This situation was potentially lethal, and all they cared about was fighting? Holy crap, he was turning into Nami if he was starting to think like that. Look, you can't come and that's final, Roronoa declared. I'm perfectly capable of finding my friends alone. Says the man who got lost finding his way back to my village, Nami huffed. That wasn't my fault, they kept moving the place. You can't move a village. You'd think in 2 years you'd gain some sort of sense of direction. Can it, sea witch? Don't talk to Nami Swan like that, sword freak, Sanji barked. Roronoa ignored him. His behavior was making the crew very confused. Why was he so adamant against them helping him? Didn't he remember all the enemies they defeated before? They could fight a group of bounty hunters. Why was he being so stubborn? Zoro-san, just let us come, Luffy insisted. Past or future, they're still my friends and I want to find them just as much as you do. I'm willing to fight a few bounty hunters to do that. Besides, your shoulder is still busted and Chopper said you can't strain yourself. You could use the help. Roronoa rubbed the shoulder in question. I get that. You just don't understand, these hunters. Understand what? Chopper asked. What's bad about these bounty hunters? These guys are New World bounty hunters. Roronoa snapped. You all aren't ready for that kind of enemy yet. Chopper went to hide behind Luffy. Roronoa was scary when he yelled. Come on, how tough can they be? Sanji said, exhaling some smoke. We've kicked the asses of the biggest names in the East Blue and have managed to survive the Grand Line so far. Maybe these bounty hunters are a challenge to a Cyclops like you, but we can handle ourselves. Cyclops? Roronoa began to yell and draw his black sword, but he stopped and rubbed his temple. Okay, you know what? Forget it. I'm not wasting my time fighting someone weaker than me. Weaker? Is that the problem? You think we're too weak? Zoro asked. He knew ever since that incident with the wax he had to get stronger, but being called weak by someone who was basically your older self. I don't think, I know, Roronoa corrected. I'm completely aware of how strong I was before arriving in Alabasta. There was an icy look in his eye. You'd last 10 minutes in the New World, if you were lucky. Zoro began to unsheath Watto. Cared to test that theory? Roronoa frowned and crossed his arms. Didn't I just say I wasn't going to fight someone weaker than me? While this exchange occurred between the two swordsmen, Sanji had begun to edge his way onto Roronoa's blind side. So he was weak, huh? Well, how would the bigger idiot Mosshead like a kick right to the blind half of his face? Yes, it would be a dirty move on his part. But Sanji was seriously annoyed. He wasn't about to let the older sword freak get away with calling him weak. Hold on, Zoro, you can't fight yourself, Usopp shouted. Yeah, do you have any idea how stupid that sounds? Nami added. Don't fight period, Chopper squealed. Roronoa is going to pull his stitches again. Luffy said nothing, instead watching his swordsman challenge the future version. I'd listen to your friends if I were you, Roronoa said. You or me, Zoro pointed out. Roronoa's attitude was getting on his nerves, and somehow, it was oddly familiar. In that case, you should be able to recall the last time you underestimated an opponent, Roronoa said. His hand went to his chest. If I recall correctly, I almost got cleaved in two. Zoro didn't respond to that, except gritting his teeth. Roronoa narrowed his eye. If you were a competent swordsman, you'd be able to see the difference in power between us. Zoro slowly slid Watto back into its sheath. That last sentence was a revelation as to why Roronoa's attitude was familiar. He was acting exactly like Mihawk had back at the Baratie, and like before, every word was pissing him off. Zoro-san, I don't doubt you can battle these guys by yourself, but that doesn't matter, Luffy spoke up, stepping in front of Zoro. He grinned. We're going to help you find your crew and take out the bounty hunters, whether you like it or not. So I guess you'll just have to deal with it. Sanji was in position. He lifted his leg. Luffy, this isn't like storming Arlong Park or taking out Don Krieg. Roronoa shouted. In those cases, you had at least a vague idea of what you were up against in terms of power. These people will be on a whole other level than you. The New World isn't the East Blue, and it isn't the beginning of the Grand Line either. There's a reason no one's been able to conquer it since Gold D. Roger. You have to be crazy strong to sail there, or you'll die. It's no place for a group of overconfident rookies. Sanji's leg shot forward, his kick aimed directly for Roronoa's face. However, it never made contact. Roronoa easily caught the cook's foot in his hand before it could. What the hell? Sanji shouted. Sanji, what are you doing? Vivi scolded him. He caught it, Usopp and Chopper exclaimed. Karoo, who had been next to Vivi the entire time, quacked in surprise at well. He wasn't even looking, Nami shouted. Luffy's eyes widened. That came at him from his blind side, Zoro thought. looking somewhere between shock and awe. But I saw his hand. It was up before the cook even finished kicking his leg out. Did he somehow know it was coming before it came? My senses are good, but to predict an attack before it's made. Sanji pulled his foot free and took a few steps back. How did you? Roronoa smirked. What? Don't tell me you seriously thought I wouldn't have figured out a way to compensate for a blind eye. I don't remember you being that ignorant, dartboard. Sanji scowled, then pivoted one foot into the deck while kicking out the other one towards Roronoa's chest. Poitrine. Roronoa rolled his eye and calmly stepped out of the way of the kick. Sanji's visible eye widened. He tried again, dropping down to a one-hand handstand, coatlet. This time the kick was aimed for his ribs, but Roronoa avoided it, moving only moments before Sanji even attacked. Normally, Sanji would have followed that up with a cell, but the fact that the previous attack didn't make contact meant he didn't have the momentum for it. The cook jumped to his feet and began a series of rapid-fire kicks. Roronoa didn't dodge, this time just blocking the kicks with his still-sheathed black sword as they came. To add insult to injury, he did it with only one hand, barely moving at all. Sanji was getting aggravated. How is this possible? It was almost as if Roronoa knew where the kicks would land before he even landed them. Zoro had always been decent at guarding against his attacks, but never at this level. It was evident by the bored expression on Roronoa's face that the swordsman was barely trying, while Sanji was already getting out of breath. Sanji tried one last kick, aimed at the older swordsman's face. Roronoa not only avoided it, but he stepped forward and was practically nose to nose with the blonde. Before Sanji had a chance to react, Roronoa partially unsheathed his black sword, ramming the hilt right into Sanji's gut. The cook went flying into the mast, hung comically there for a few seconds, then slid to the deck. Sanji! Chopper yelled worriedly. He rushed over to his crewmate's side. Nobody else moved, only staring at the scene before them. Zoro and Sanji fought all the time, but neither of them ever actually won against each other. Those skirmishes always ended in a draw. Roronoa, however, had won. Tie. Zoro had to fight on par with Sanji. Roronoa had won by barely even trying. Zoro's face managed to remain stoic in appearance, but if you really knew him, you'd be able to see that he was on the verge of a major freak-out. How is he able to do all that just 2 years later? Do you get the idea now? Roronoa asked, sliding his sword back into his sash. He gestured to Sanji. The love cook is usually able to at least keep up with my younger self, and I just curb-stomped him. You did not curb-stomp me, you. Sanji started to argue, before going into a coughing fit. Roronoa's last attack had knocked the wind out of him. Stop talking and let me check you over, Chopper scolded him. I need to see if you hurt your back again. I've trained to take on the new world, Roronoa went on, again ignoring Sanji. If the cook can't even keep up with me anymore, what does that say about your chances with bounty hunters who have most likely been there longer than I have? There was no immediate reply. The crew probably didn't know what to say. Luffy? Nami said at last. I can't believe I'm saying this, but maybe we should listen to Roronoa. Zoro's strong as it is, but... This guy wasn't even trying, Usopp yelled panically, waving his arm rapidly at Roronoa. What does that say about other people from the New World? They couldn't see Luffy's expression, for his face was shadowed by his hat. The others didn't know it, but Luffy didn't really care about the beating Sanji just received. Sure, the way Roronoa caught his foot before was cool. However, his mind was too busy repeating the words Roronoa had said before to really appreciate it. It's no place for a group of overconfident rookies. Or more accurately, the way he said those words. He'd obviously been trying to hide it, but he had sounded worried, like he was dreading what would happen if his crew came along. Roronoa may have been from the future, but he was still Zoro. Zoro had only ever sounded like that once before, back when he'd been sure his captain was about to die. Luffy didn't like that Roronoa sounded like that. Not one bit. Luffy? Vivi asked quietly. Zoro-san, Luffy said finally. You're from the future, but I'm still your captain, aren't I? Roronoa's expression softened slightly. Of course you are. Luffy lifted his head, revealing he was smiling. Then this is a captain's order. You have to let us come with you and find your crew. No arguing. Roronoa's eye widened to almost comical size. Luffy was pulling the captain card on him? Seriously? Not only was it a low blow, but it was the one card in Luffy's limited psychological deck he had no counter for. A captain's orders were absolute, past or present. You're trying to make this hard for me on purpose, aren't you? Roronoa sighed, rubbing the bridge of his nose. Luffy crossed his arms, still smiling. It doesn't have to be hard. All you have to do is agree. Roronoa threw his arms in the air, exasperated. Okay, fine, you all can come, but on one condition. Will you let me have that much? Sure. What's your condition? You can't fight anyone unless I either say it's okay, or you absolutely have to. He held out his hand. Do we have a deal? Luffy hesitated, shifting his gaze between the hand and Roronoa's face. Finally, he grasped his first crewmate's hand in a firm grip. Deal. Vivi yawned, making her way from the girls' room to the galley. It was still technically the afternoon, but she was as tired as she would be at night. Not surprising, really. The day had been exhausting as a whole. First getting dragged to this island, then finding Roronoa on said island, and everything that had occurred after their dinner for lunch. Once the deal between Luffy and Roronoa had been struck, Tony announced that Sanji's back was fine except for a slight bruising, and Roronoa hadn't pulled any stitches loose. Sanji, naturally, tried to avenge his humiliating defeat. Only instead of attacking Roronoa, he planted a kick straight into Mr. Bushido's stomach. The crew left those two to work out their differences themselves, and returned to the galley to finish their now cold food. Most of it ended up going to Luffy. Afterwards, Roronoa had wanted to start the search for his crew right away, but Nami pointed out Tony's earlier observation of it being too dark. They would never find anyone in the jungle at night. He took a little talking down and threats of raising his debt, but the elder swordsman eventually agreed to it. By that point, everyone was both mentally and physically exhausted, so it was unanimously agreed that they would go to bed and start their search the next time the sun rose. Whenever that would be, anyway. With this island, who could tell? Nami and Karoo conked out almost right away, but Vivi was having a harder time with it. She was very tired, but her body knew it was still the afternoon and refused to fall asleep. She ended up deciding to head down to the galley and have a cup of the tea Sanji had brewed before going to bed himself. His fight with Mr. Bushido ended in a draw, of course. Though both had been fighting harder than usual, maybe it would help her sleep. She climbed up the ladder leading up to the deck and pushed the trapdoor open. Sure enough, it was still night out. She sighed, pulled herself up onto the deck, and started making her way to the galley. What are you still doing up? Vivi jumped about a foot at the sudden deep voice. She turned to see Roronoa lying against the railing, arms behind his head. I could ask the same of you, Mr. Bushido, Vivi panted, trying to calm her rapidly beating heart. I thought you went to sleep in the boys' room hours ago. Roronoa shrugged. Couldn't fall asleep, so I came up here. Vivi raised a skeptical eyebrow. You, Roronoa Zoro, couldn't fall asleep. So you do know how to say my name, he said with a slightly derisive smirk. It quickly faded and he shrugged again. It's too quiet around here. You'd be surprised by the gap 3 missing voices leave. Vivi blinked, confused. Missing voices. Never mind, he sighed. Forget I said anything. So what about you? What are you doing on deck? I couldn't sleep either, she admitted. I'm not surprised. It's technically only 3 in the afternoon. Yes, I know. I figured I'd go get myself a cup of tea. Do you want one too? Nah, I'm good. Hope it helps. Thank you. She moved on ahead and was about to open the galley door, when she stopped. A question had been nagging at the back of her mind for hours now, and since Roronoa was just sitting there all alone, now would be a perfect time to ask. She slowly walked back over to him, and saw his eye was now closed. Mr. Bushido? She said softly. Roronoa's eye cracked open. She put her hands behind her back. Remember earlier, when I asked why we couldn't also risk our lives if you were going to? He lowered his arms and sat up a little straighter. Yeah, what about it? Well, I was just wondering what you meant when you said I shouldn't be one to talk. Roronoa gazed up at her for a long time, before exhaling through his nose and leaning back again. You're too self-sacrificing, Vivi, he said, closing his eye. But then again, I guess I'm not one to talk either. Vivi crossed her arms. You're not going to give me a straight answer, are you? Nope. Jerk. Completely nice guys don't become pirates. Given you were a bounty hunter for 2 years, one would think you knew that already. Vivi frowned, but decided not to push it. The fact he wasn't giving her a straight answer meant that it fell under the category of the future, and Luffy had ordered them not to ask about that anymore. Alright, she sighed, thanks anyway, good night. Night. Vivi entered the galley and closed the door quietly behind her. Once she was gone, Roronoa opened his eye and stood up. He walked over to the mast and looked up. You coming down? He called up to the crow's nest, or are you going to stay up there acting like you haven't been listening in all night? A minute later, Kupin jumped down to the deck. It was none other than Zoro. When did you figure out I was up there? The younger swordsman asked, standing up straight. I knew from the moment I came on deck, Roronoa replied. Care to explain why you were spying on me? You're me. You tell me why, you don't trust me. It wasn't a question, it was a solid fact and both swordsmen knew it. You got that right, Zoro said with a scowl. I know you're hiding something from us, and it's not a future adventure or whatever. Don't think I haven't noticed all the looks you've been giving Luffy. Roronoa didn't reply. So, care to tell me why you keep glancing at Luffy with such a guilty look in your eye? Zoro asked, his tone venomous. Roronoa's hand slipped down to his Wado Ichimonji. Not in a threatening way, but more in a, just making sure it's there, way. Zoro recognized the gesture. He did the exact same thing when he was either thinking of Kuina or thinking about his promise to Luffy. When we were in the fog, we heard voices, Zoro continued. Voices of people we knew, people we didn't know, and our own. I heard my voice say I couldn't protect my captain. Does that have anything to do with it? What exactly about my crew's future do you represent? The elder swordsman's gaze grew steely as he looked sharply down at his younger counterpart. Roronoa was a good inch or two taller. Zoro's mouth suddenly felt dry. The air around them felt thick and heavy. Don't make assumptions about events you know nothing about, brat, Roronoa said coldly. Roronoa turned on his heel and stepped away from the younger swordsman. He then started climbing up to the crow's nest. About halfway up, he looked back down at Zoro. Once I find my crew, you never have to worry about me again. Or for the next 2 years, at least. Now get to bed. We have a long day tomorrow. Roronoa climbed into the crow's nest, leaving Zoro standing there. The younger swordsman did eventually go to bed, but he didn't get much sleep. He couldn't get his older self-steel gaze out of his mind. It was the gaze of a man who had been cracked in several places and welded back together. A man who had not quite been broken, but came pretty close, and that alone shook Zoro down to his very core. What the hell? Bodies. Bodies were scattered everywhere in this section of the jungle. Some were dead. Most were not. But all had their spines bent at impossible angles. You've got to be kidding me, Arati shouted, tugging at her hair. What the heck wiped out Delta Unit? No one made an effort to answer her though. Yari just adjusted the position of her parasol while Runo poked one of the dead bodies with a stick. Gamma Unit stood back, watching the scene with a careful eye. Arati knelt down next to one of the live ones. Tell me who did this to you, now. The man choked. It was difficult to breathe, let alone speak. I don't know. Extra arms from our bodies appeared out of nowhere. Arati frowned. Extra arms? That would be the demon of Ohara, Yari clarified, as if reading Arati's mind. I heard she has the abilities of the flower fruit. It is very useful for incapacitating many enemies at once. She grinned eerily. I have seen her wanted poster. She would make a lovely doll. Oh, come off it, Arati snapped. We don't have time to indulge in your sick interests. Can't you see this as a problem? We just lost about 35 of our men? Arati knew who the so-called demon of Ohara, Nico Robin, was. While it was an interesting development, she didn't appreciate having a good chunk of her men twisted up like pretzels. Then they were weak, Runo said, standing up and tossing his stick aside. Someone else would have tore them a new one eventually if the devil child hadn't gotten to them first. It's for the best though. We have no use for toys that can't play rough. Arati put her hands on her hips. You guys and your obsessions with dolls and toys. What, did kids not play with you too much when you were young? Runo and Yari were immediately on their knees, an aura of depression hanging over their heads. How did she know that? They said together. Idiots, Arati thought with a sweat drop. Enough of this crap. A member of Gamma Unit yelled, "We've had it." Arati turned to look at the speaker. It was one of the newer members of the unit. In fact, Gamma Unit was almost entirely made up of mostly new people. They had only been sailing with the boss for about a week. Rico, she believed his name was. "We've been searching for this treasure for more than 8 hours," Rico went on, "and so far, we've found absolutely nothing." "Well, maybe we would have made more progress," Arati ground out. She glared at Runo and Yari. "If some people hadn't gotten caught by giant Venus flytraps 13 times. "Oi, it wasn't 13 times, Runo protested, jumping to his feet. He crossed his arms. "It was 12 times. We got out of the way with the last one." "Shut up," Rico snarled. "I'm sick of listening to you three argue, and I'm sick of watching you get owned by some coward sniper with freaky ammunition. We're done taking orders from you, and we're done searching for some stupid treasure that probably doesn't even exist." Behind Rico, the members of Gamma Unit were all holding up their weapons and sharing identical smug smirks. Yari stood up and said in a bored tone, "Please do not tell me that after all this time, you're just now deciding to mutiny." "They weren't with us for that long," Arati said. "However, I'm with you on the irregularity of this. If he wanted a mutiny, he should have done it after a few years, so we'd trust him more and never see it coming." "Speak for yourself," Runo said with a snort. "I wouldn't want to spend time with you lot any longer than I have to, never mind for another few years." Yari nodded. "I second that emotion." Arati crossed her arms. "Then we've reached a consensus." Rico held out his sword, irritated that they weren't paying attention to him. "You think we're not serious? Just you wait, we'll kill the 3 of you and then go after the Straw Hats. Their bounties will keep us set for life." Runo grinned ferally and stuck his hands on his hips. "I don't recall the boss hiring so many ignorant fools into his little troop. Looks like some re-education is in order." "Arati, do you mind if we handle this?" Yari said, closing her parasol. "I have not had a good fight since Vaughn interrupted my duel with the pirate hunter." Arati waved her hand. "Be my guest. Just make it quick, and try not to kill anyone. We guarantee nothing." Rico gave a loud battle cry, charging directly at Yari. He wasn't going to be dismissed so casually. He would show them he meant business. Yari just stood calmly. "Nerf coupe," Yari muttered, holding her parasol upside down. She leapt forward, planting her palm on Rico's face, then vaulting herself into the air by springing off his head. Fleuve douloureux, it happened so quickly, anyone who didn't have hockey wouldn't have been able to see it. Rico stopped charging, and now just stood there with his sword. Yari was back on the ground, brandishing her Shikomizu sword, which she had drawn from its hidden spot in her parasol out in front of her. A small cut appeared on Rico's shoulder. It wasn't deep, and it barely bled at all. However, it caused Rico's eyes to widen to impossible size, and he began to scream. It was a scream filled with hurt and agony, as if Yari had cut the entire arm off instead of just nicking the shoulder. He collapsed, writhing on the ground as he clutched his shoulder. He screamed until he fell silent, either unconscious or dead. "Rico!" A member of Gamma Unit shouted. "What's wrong? A little cut like that shouldn't hurt so much." "You witch!" Another shouted. "What did you do to Rico?" "I just increased the sensitivity of his nociceptors," Yari replied, flicking the drops of blood off her sword. She gave the unit a smug smirk of her own. "That is the power of my nerve fruit." The mutineers blanched. Being so new to the bounty hunter crew, they had yet to learn of whatever abilities the boss's top lieutenants had. This was the first time they had seen Yari use her sword and her devil fruit powers. It was no secret that devil fruit users from the New World were a breed all their own, so this wasn't going to be easy. That wasn't going to stop them from completing Rico's mission though. The unit charged, weapons armed and ready. They were going to avenge their leader at any cost. They might have done so too, if Runo hadn't gotten in the way. Runo cackled wildly, jumping between the 40 or so members of Gamma Unit and Yari. He moved like a beast, kicking, clawing, and scratching everyone who got close. He twisted his torso around nearly 180 degrees to smack away a gun. He hooked his leg over his own shoulder to perform a double spinning flip and kicked 2 guys in the face at once. He picked up 2 guns and fired behind him by bending his arms unnaturally far back. Some of the mutineers stared on in horror. What was this guy, part jellyfish. It was as if he had no bones. What is with this guy? One asked. Is it a devil fruit ability? Another asked. I did eat a devil fruit, Runo admitted. But it's not the reason I'm like this, you see. He is triple-jointed, Yari interrupted. Runo's head slumped forward. The depressed aura was back. Don't steal my thunder, Yari. Yari rolled her eyes. Shut up and fight, Runo. From that point on, Yari and Runo fought together. Runo mostly used whatever weapons the defeated dropped, as well as some strange fighting style they couldn't identify. Yari cut down whoever came across her path, her sword moving with great speed. She usually made only superficial cuts, but those cuts caused her victims to scream from sheer agony. The two were fast, efficient, and deadly. No wonder they had come, highly recommended. It wasn't long before only 10 mutineers remained standing. Barely standing, but standing nonetheless. Wanna surrender now? Arati called out from the top of the large tree root she had been hiding on. Never, one of the remaining 10 shouted back. That doesn't work for me, Arati sighed. I tell Runo and Yari to just knock you out, tie you to a tree, and leave you to the jungle's mercy, but we still have Neox like we're going with option B. Yes. Runo cheered. I love option B. With that declaration, Arati and Yari averted their eyes from Runo. The mutineers looked on in confusion. What were they doing? Runo stood up straight, snapped his fingers, and then began some sort of strange dance that utilized a lot of sudden movements. Immediately, the air around him seemed to shimmer, and his eyes flashed a whole rainbow of colors every few seconds. The colors then started to expand, surrounding his body and mingling with the hazy air. The 10 remaining gammas wanted to look away, but found they couldn't. The colors, the dance, the shimmery air. It was so amazing to watch. Hypno. Runo said in a soft, purring tone. He stopped dancing, his arms crossed over his head, trance. The mutineers dropped their weapons. Their faces looked dazed, and their eyes were glassy. Here are your orders. Do whatever I say, when I say it, got it? Yes, Master Runo, the now entranced mutineers replied in unison. Runo grinned. Good. Your first orders is to clean up here. The unconscious and dead bodies draw attention away from the natural flora, wouldn't you say? The mutineers nodded in unison and began to do just that. Meanwhile, now that the show was over, Arati and Yari could look at Runo without fear of being affected. Arati jumped down from the giant tree root. That's the power of the hypno fruit. Huh? I've never actually been around you while you did that. As if you weren't creepy enough. Runo shrugged and walked over to join the girls. It's a power that works, and it makes it easy to get new toys, at least. Arati never liked how Runo referred to his victims as toys. She may have been a ruthless bounty hunter, when the situation required it, but even she had some standards. What Runo did was one step shy of slavery. The only difference between being hypnotized and being enslaved was with the former. You didn't actually realize you were a slave. It was twisted and wrong, but the boss never asked Runo to stop, so he kept right on doing it on the condition he undid the trance if an assignment went longer than a week. It usually took that long for Runo to grow bored with his toys anyway. Then again, it was preferable compared to what Yari did to create her dolls. That had to constitute as torture. Seeing as the present crisis has passed, I would like to bring up the issue of the rest of Straw Hats, Yari said, sheathing her sword and opening up the once again whole parasol. Rico was a fool, but he had a point. It was ridiculous how we kept falling for the sniper's same attack. Something needs to be done about him and his crew. He was also right about their bounties, Runo added. It's a massive haul. It's shame we stopped chasing them just because we ended up on this island. Arati thought about that. The Straw Hats did have a collective bounty of 800,050,000 berries. That was a lot of berry. More than the group had made in its years of bounty hunting. She could see the appeal Runo was talking about. Not counting the ones they had already taken care of, that left 5 Straw Hats to defeat, 6 if you counted the swordsman. He was most likely still alive. Despite taking all those tranquilizer darts, however, there was the matter of their boss. He would want them to focus on the treasure, not the pirates. I am all for hunting for them, Yari said, interrupting the other girl's thoughts. But how do you plan on getting the boss to go for it? He is obsessed with finding that treasure. Told you the guy had issues, Runo grumbled. I think I have a solution. Arati broke in. Boss wants to find the treasure to impress the higher-ups at Navy HQ, right? The creepy duo nodded. Look at it this way. Just imagine the look on Fleet Admiral Sakazuki's face if Boss not only brings in the treasure, but also the Son of Dragon. Their eyes widened. Their boss would love that. Not only would the Navy reinstate him, they would also probably give him a huge promotion. Not to mention they would get the boy's gigantic bounty along with his crews. It was no secret Akainu had something of an obsession with bringing in Dragon's son, at least ever since the events of Marineford 2 years ago. This would be perfect. You are an evil genius, Arati, Runo complimented. I'm in. He then turned tail and began running into the jungle. Where are you going? Yari called after him. Back to camp. I want to get my toys to help with the hunt. Yari rolled her eyes as he ran out of sight. That man was hopeless sometimes. With nothing else to do at the moment, she began supervising the toys cleanup. Meanwhile, Arati reached into her pocket and pulled out the baby Den Den Mushi her boss told her to carry. Ring ring ring. Ring ring ring. Ring ring ring. Ring ring clank. The Den Den's face took an annoyed and tired expression. The forces of hell better be biting at your heels, Bon's voice muttered through the snail. Or so help me. Is it too much to ask for a hello? Arati said dryly. What, did I wake you up in the middle of a nap? The snail looked sheepish. Maybe, aren't you supposed to be guarding the brat? The baby Den Den's face suddenly looked very indignant, and a new voice came from it. Hey, watcher you call a brat, Mohawk new woman. I should. The angry look melted into an irritated one as Vaughn's voice returned. Gimme that, Vaughn sighed. Sorry about that. The little snot who I am watching snatched the receiver right out of my hands. So, how's searching going? You guys have been gone since that first daybreak. Arati scowled. Nothing so far except a slew of aggravating encounters with man-eating plants. Brilliant, and I still can't get Siobhan to spill anything. I can already hear Boss screaming at us after promising not to get angry. However, I doubt you called just to tell me that. You got that right. I need you to get the regular Den Den Mushi and contact the men we still have on the ship. Tell them to start circling the island and to keep an eye out for the Straw Hats' boat. Okay. Crap, are we doing what I think we're going to do? For someone who originally said the Straw Hats weren't a priority, Vaughn sure sounded eager. Arati grinned, but a pulse throbbed angrily on her temple. Before I confirm your suspicions, let's have a quick chat about the strength of your trank darts. Location. Going merry it was sunset, the fading light painting everything red and gold. All around Luffy was nothing but sand, big rocks, and more sand. Luffy blinked. He didn't know the Mystery Island had a desert too. Why hadn't Zoro-Osan said anything? Then again, if he was still on the Mystery Island, wouldn't the sand be pink? Weird. He looked over his shoulder to see his crewmates, minus Karoo. Though there was a camel. When did a camel join the crew? That was awesome. They were all dressed strangely, in long robes and a couple of them wore head coverings. It was then Luffy noticed he was dressed quite similarly. He wore a dark red robe with a blue scarf wrapped several times around his neck. Well then, a voice spoke up. A familiar one. Luffy turned back around and gasped. Standing before him, adjusting his beloved orange hat, was none other than his big brother. He was looking at the crew, giving them a warm smile. Ace? Luffy thought. Is that really him? Ace certainly looked different than the last time Luffy saw him, to be expected. Given that was 3 years ago, he was taller and more buff. Ace had always been naturally muscular, his voice was a little deeper too. At that moment, Ace was wearing a white scarf and a black robe that had red flame patterns along the bottom and sleeves. He also wore black shorts, black boots, an orange belt that had the letter A on the buckle, and a sheathed knife. He also carried a green and black patterned bag over his shoulder, and had a log pose around his wrist. Did everyone dress weird in the desert? You're not really going to leave us, Ace, are you? Luffy heard Chopper say. The little to see Ace go. Yeah, Ace replied. Seeing how it's been confirmed Blackbeard isn't in Alabasta, I have no reason to stick around. You sure? Luffy heard himself say. It was like his mouth was speaking of its own accord. He hadn't wanted to say that. He wanted to ask his brother what he was doing here. Were they really in Alabasta? If it was, no wonder Vivi left. There was nothing but sand. How could they have gotten to Alabasta so fast? Any idea where you'll be headed next? Sanji asked. I have a lead to Blackbeard's whereabouts, Ace said. He reached into his pocket and removed a piece of paper. Scorpion heard about a man who saw him out west. Guess we'll see. Ace tossed the paper over to Luffy, who caught it. Why was Ace giving him this? It was just paper. Luffy, do yourself a favor and hang on to that, Ace instructed. Always. But it's just a scrap of paper, Luffy pointed out. That scrap of paper will reunite us someday, yeah? You don't want it, Ace teased. No, I'll keep it, Luffy assured him. It wasn't just his mouth this time. Luffy honestly meant it. Ace grinned, only this smile was more directed at Luffy's crew than Luffy himself. It's perfectly natural for a guy to worry about his bumbling kid brother, right? Luffy's breath hitched. That one of the things Ace's voice had said in the mystery fog. He might be a bit much for all of you to handle, Ace went on. He bowed to the crew. But take good care of him for me. Luffy's eyes widened. Was Ace placing his trust in Luffy's friends? Ace went upright and gave his little brother a serious look. Luffy, when next we meet, we'll both be top pirates. Luffy felt himself grin. Right? Ace's seriousness melted into a smile. The top, you and me. The top, Luffy thought. He looked down at Ace's paper. And then all of a sudden, the paper wasn't in his hand. It was on the ground several feet away, sliding on the ice. Wait. Ice? Where was the sand? And why was Luffy kneeling on the ground? He had been standing a moment ago. The paper kept getting farther and farther away. Luffy reached out for it. Then he felt a strong heat come straight for him. He looked up to what looked like a fist, only it was gloppy and burning. Whatever it was, Luffy didn't have to be a genius to know that if it hit him, it was going to hurt. Then out of nowhere, the fist stopped, red beads scattered. And fire and blood were the only things Luffy could see. Luffy jolted upright and his arms flailed about, causing him to lose his balance and fall right out of his hammock. He bounced onto the floor, landing on his stomach. His hat fell after him, floating down neatly onto his back. He quickly sat up and jammed hat back on top of his head, but his hand shook the entire time. The dream had started out so nice. What had caused it to become so dark and scary, and end the way it did? He was pretty sure that gloppy burning fist hadn't struck him, but then where did all that blood come from? Had someone jumped in the way? Luffy hoped not. He could count the number of people he thought for sure would do that for him on one hand, and he didn't want any of those people to get hurt for his sake. Luffy? You awake? Luffy looked up. Usopp was looking down at him from the trap door that led out onto the deck. Yeah, I'm awake, Luffy called up. Usopp swallowed. Luffy wasn't sure why, but Usopp was looking at him strangely. The expression was unlike the sniper, and that bothered Luffy. Did you need something, or? Luffy asked. Usopp snapped out of his daze. Oh, no, I didn't need anything. I just came to tell you breakfast's ready. Though it's technically 8 at night, so that would make it more like dinner. You coming? Luffy nodded and cheered. Food, I'll be right there. Usopp smiled half-heartedly and stepped away from the trapdoor. Luffy sighed and stood up, dusting himself off. That dream had been unnerving at the end, but he wouldn't worry about it. What really got him was what happened in the beginning. He didn't know why, but the part with Ace and being in Alabasta. It felt so real, like it actually happened. But they hadn't even arrived in Alabasta, so that couldn't possibly be so. Yet, anyway. Luffy groaned. All this thinking was making his head hurt. If he kept this up, he was going to get a fever. He climbed up the ladder leading to the trapdoor. It was time for some breakfast for dinner. Alright everybody, listen up, Nami commanded. The crew was in the galley, in the middle of eating their breakfast for dinner. Luffy was digging into his food with the usual vigor. Usopp sat across from him, not really eating with his food, more like just pushing it around on his plate. And Vivi was eating and feeding Karoo at the same time. Zoro sat on the far side of the table, as far away as he could from his older self. Most of the crew noticed he had been avoiding him all morning, who was currently sitting on the ground getting his shoulder examined by Chopper. Actually, it was more like Chopper was nervously scolding Roronoa for removing his bandages, while the latter tuned the former out. Sanji was once again passing out food, as he always did. Being the chef, Only he set Roronoa's plate down rather roughly. He was clearly still angry about the previous night. Nami stood in front of the galley door. A large sketch pad on a stand propped next to her. Written on the pad were the words, "What we know," and everything that fell under that category was written under it. When she barked out her command, everyone turned to look at her. "Somewhere on that island is a crew made up of our older selves and a group of crazy powerful New World bounty hunters," Nami said. "Thanks to our captain, we've been roped into aiding Roronoa in searching for the former. Since we obviously don't want to run into the latter, we can't just go gallivanting into the jungle. We need a plan." She smacked the sketch pad with her palm. "This island is strange, and we don't really know anything about this situation. I did, however, take the liberty writing down everything we do know so far." Everyone skimmed the list. What we know: 1. This island is able to exist in 2 places. 2. Night and day have strange patterns. 3. The plants grow at irregular rates, Sanji, Chopper, and Vivi's fruit glade. 4. The island cannot be locked onto by any form of log pose. 5. The fog that surrounds the island seems to act as an entryway. 6. Time does whatever it wants. 7. Roronoa doesn't remember ever meeting his older self back when he was 19. 8. There are at least 2 bounty hunters out there, maybe more. 9. There is also a little girl on the island who appears to live there. She knows about this place. 10. As for future Straw Hat Pirates locations, there is at least 1 crew member that was left behind on the ship. 11. Something has happened to Nami's older self. Why is that bit about your older self on the list? Zoro asked. We found my older self's log pose, and we know something happened to her, Nami replied. So it goes on the list. Knowing you, I'm surprised you didn't put it at the top. Shut it, sword freak. We have every right to be concerned about future Nami Swan, Sanji snapped. His visible eye turned into a heart. I can't to see what she looks like. I bet she's even more beautiful than she is now. Shut up, Mr. Nosebleed, Roronoa muttered as he pushed Chopper away from his shoulder. You're giving me a headache. Who are you calling Mr. Nosebleed? Sanji bellowed. Why are you calling him Mr. Nosebleed? Chopper asked, begrudgingly packing up his bandages. His nose isn't bleeding. Roronoa's eye blinked, then he grinned wickedly. Well, you see, in the future, the cook's nose. Zoro-san, Luffy shouted, his mouth full of bacon. No telling us about the future. Whoops, sorry, Roronoa apologized, not sounding sorry in the least. Guess it'd be better to keep that one a surprise. Zoro didn't show it, but he was now very curious about what his older self was going to say. Usopp's sweat dropped. Gee, I think we can guess what you mean by that insult. Usopp, Vivi gasped. She shook her head. Never mind. Nami, would you please continue? Thank you, Vivi. I'm glad somebody appreciates my efforts, Nami said with a sniff. She pointed to number 10 on the list. Roronoa, you did say your crew left a member on the ship, right? I wasn't wrong to write that? Roronoa stood up and took a seat at the table. He took a bite of French toast before answering. No, that's right. When we weighed anchor, our shipwright offered to stay behind and watch the ship while the rest of us explored. Said he had some detail work to do anyway. Shipwright, Vivi repeated. We don't have a shipwright, Usopp said. Which is why I'm always the one fixing the Mary when Luffy breaks something. Like the mast and the figurehead. Hey, Laboon's the one who broke the figurehead, not me, Luffy protested. Who's Laboon? Chopper asked. A giant whale who lives next to Reverse Mountain, Luffy replied. He grinned eagerly. Next time I see him, we're gonna fight. Why would you want to fight a whale? Chopper gasped. Is it because he broke the figurehead? No, young Chopper, Usopp said dramatically. It was a promise between men. Well, between a man and a whale, but you know what I mean. Luffy promised Laboon he would return after our journey across the Grand Line, and they would duel. Wow, Chopper said, his eyes sparkling in admiration for Luffy. Anyway, Sanji interrupted. He gave Roronoa a glare. Like Usopp said, we don't have a shipwright. He stopped glaring and thought that over for a moment. Though considering how often the Mary gets beat up, getting one might be a good investment. Roronoa frowned, looking like he wanted to tell them something. However, He appeared to change his mind and instead said, "What, you don't think the Straw Hat Pirates would have picked up a few extra members over time? This probably falls under the category of the future, but since Luffy insists on you all helping me, you should know. Besides myself, Luffy, Nami, Chopper, Usopp, and the Love Cook, we have 3 other crewmates in the future." "Only 9 people for a crew?" Vivi asked. She giggled. "I don't know why, but putting together such a small crew just sounds so Luffy." "It does, but I kind of expected us to have a much larger crew after 2 years," Nami commented. 20 or 30 members, at least." Roronoa took a hasty sip of milk. "We just don't do that much recruiting." Luffy grinned. He was a little unhappy this search made Roronoa reveal something about the future, but he was happy to hear his future crew's size. He always said he wanted at least 10 guys. Just 1 more to go. "In any case, fewer members means it's that much less searching we have to do," Nami went on. "Roronoa, do you have any idea where your crewmates could have gone on the island? You did say you all split up." Roronoa leaned back a little. Well, I think Nami, Chopper, Usopp and the cook all went together in one group. They wanted to look for supplies and stuff. And Nami also wanted to survey the land for a map. Frankie, that's our shipwright, stayed on the ship. I'm pretty sure Robin went off by herself, but with that woman, who can?" "Robin? Woman?" Sanji repeated. He got close to Roronoa's face. "You mean another lady joins the crew? What is she like? Is she gorgeous?" "Get out of my face, Swirls," Roronoa snapped, pushing the blonde out of his personal space. "Since you're probably going to meet her anyway, yes, another lady joins the crew. I guess she's pretty, though she's not really my type, so I can't give any major descriptions. You'll just have to wait and see Robin for your—" Roronoa froze, as if he suddenly realized what he was saying. Then, very slowly, he turned to look at Vivi. Vivi suddenly felt uncomfortable. "Is there something wrong, Mr. Bushido?" Roronoa looked away and closed his eye, rubbing his temple as he muttered, "Yeah, that might be a problem. And not just for her." The Straw Hats gave the elder swordsman confused looks. What was he mumbling about? "Why would it be a problem?" Luffy asked. "Is something wrong with this Robin lady?" Roronoa contemplated how to explain it, but decided this was a story for another time. He waved it off. "Never mind, I'll explain it later." Zoro gave the elder swordsman a sideways glance. "Why? Something to hide?" Roronoa returned the glance. "Didn't I say not to make assumptions?" The 2 swordsmen glared at each other. You could practically see the antagonistic lightning passing between them. "Wow," Usopp whispered to Chopper. "You'd think Zoro would get along great with someone that's basically himself in the future. These 2 look like they can't stand each other." "They're both scary," Chopper whimpered. "Roronoa, you said there were 8 other people in your crew." Nami chose to interrupt. "You haven't counted off for 2 of them yet." Roronoa broke his staring contest with Zoro. "Fine. Where was I? Yeah, Robin. I have no idea where she might have gone off to. Anyway, I was going on a walk with a crewmate named Brook, who's a guy, so don't even ask, Cook, until he went and got himself lost. I was actually looking for him when I ran into that weird little girl." "And future Luffy? Moron went rocketing into the jungle before we even dropped the anchor." The present Luffy snickered. She, that sounds like something I would do. I hope he's having fun." "Wonderful," Nami sighed sarcastically. "So other than this Frankie guy, we have no definite clue as to your crew's whereabouts. At least this gives us a place to start. Did you guys weigh anchor along the beach, or somewhere else?" "It was along the beach. Can't remember where, though," Roronoa replied. "That's fine. Even if you did remember, you'd probably end up leading us in the wrong direction anyway," Nami said dryly. She pointed to the beach outside the galley window. "Then that's our first step. We'll walk along the beach until we find the future cruise ship." "Ah," Luffy whined. "I wanted to explore the jungle first." "No way," Nami shrieked. "We're not going into the jungle when we don't know what's in there. Which is why we need to explore it. My older self had the right idea. Maybe we should break into groups." Vivi tried to compromise. "We'd be able to cover more ground that way in less time, since we don't know how long daylight is going to last this time around." "Normally I'd agree with you, but Nami's right for once," Zoro said. "Besides, not knowing what the heck is in that freaky jungle, There are also New World bounty hunters in there. Since we're apparently not allowed to fight them without Roronoa's permission, going in there would be suicide. It's best we stick together. We can try the jungle after we find Frankie, Roronoa added. You could say he's one of our crew's big guns. We should keep an eye out for the little girl Roronoa mentioned, Sanji added. She might be able to aid us. So we have a plan then? Nami asked. There was mutual nodding amongst the gathered pirates, and Princess, okay. Then pack up what you need and head for the beach. We leave in 10 minutes. With that being said, the Straw Hats quickly finished their breakfasts and departed from the galley to prepare for Operation Save the Future, as Usopp decided to call it, much to Luffy's exclamations of the name's coolness. Usopp left the galley, giving Luffy an awkward wave as he exited. Chopper ran from the galley, muttering under his breath what he would need for the trip from his clinic. Zoro left the galley as quickly as physically possible, pushing past Vivi and Karoo to do so. This made Sanji charge after him, though not before shooting Roronoa another glare. Roronoa just sighed and exited the galley after Sanji, grumbling about stupid blondes who couldn't let things go. Soon, the only people who remained were Luffy and Nami. The former was eating the table scraps, and the latter was cleaning up her display. Hey, what's up with Zoro? Luffy asked, swallowing really weird today. So was Usopp, but Luffy didn't think Nami knew anything about that. Nami collapsed her metal stand. I don't really know, but back while you were asleep, he kept giving Roronoa all these weird, suspicious glances. However, if you want my opinion, I don't think he or Sanji trust him very much. Luffy raised a confused eyebrow. Huh? Why wouldn't they trust Zoro-san? He's Zoro, and why wouldn't Zoro trust himself? Technically, he's Zoro in 2 years. What difference does that make? It may not sound like much, but 2 years is a pretty long time, Nami sighed, folding up her sketchpad. People change. It's not that long. It is for pirates. Our lives are pretty rough, and a lot can happen in 2 years. Roronoa may not be the same Zoro we know now. It was pretty obvious yesterday when he took down Sanji that he's different in the strength aspect. Anyway, he's twice the monster Zoro is now. It makes me wonder how much everyone else might have changed too. Luffy frowned. Truthfully, he had similar suspicions when Roronoa first came aboard, but after Roronoa agreed to the captain's orders, Luffy had pretty much dismissed them. Zoro was still Zoro. He wouldn't change, would he? Do you think Zoro-san's trustworthy? Luffy asked. His navigator shrugged. More or less. I have to, or else we'd never be able to figure out anything on this backward island. For now, let's say he's trustworthy unless he does something that suggests otherwise. That didn't make Luffy feel better. If anything, it made him feel worse. Nami squeezed his shoulder in an attempt to comfort him. Come on, let's go get ready. We need to leave soon. She left the galley, leaving Luffy to himself. The pirate captain sat down and remained seated at the table, thinking over Nami's words. Granted, he knew people did change as time went on. Ace had been really mean when he was younger, but got nicer as the years went by. But that was 7 years, not 2. Zoro, or anyone else, couldn't have changed that much. Maybe, he guessed he would just have to see, now wouldn't he? He had to meet his future crew to find them, after all. Location. Outskirts of the Kala jungle. Yohohoho, 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 yohohoho. The sun had risen again. It had only been night for roughly 5 hours, but he wasn't complaining. He never did like sitting in the dark for too long. It brought too many harsh memories. At least that fog from before hadn't made its way to the main island yet. He'd had enough fog for one lifetime, then knew very much. Though, he wasn't actually alive anymore, so he guessed he couldn't complain. He took a sip of tea. He always carried some around in a thermos. He still hadn't been able to find the others, including the crewmate he had gotten separated from. The island was big and confusing. He couldn't even remember where they had docked the ship. He had been alone for quite some time now. He never did like being alone. So for now, he decided to take a break. His crewmates were very capable and could care for themselves if need be. And who knows, perhaps they all had already made their way back to the ship and were currently looking for him as well. All he really needed to do was wait. The only issue now was how to pass the time until he either found his friends, or they found him. He knew it was a good idea to bring his violin along. He pulled his bow back and began to play. Yo ho ho ho, yo ho ho ho, yo ho ho ho, yo ho ho ho. Binkusu no sake wo. Tadok ni yuku yo. Umakaze kimakase namimakase. Bye, Kuru. Bye, Vivi. Bye, Usopp. Luffy called out, walking backward as he waved the duck, princess, and sniper goodbye. Take care of the Mary while we're gone. Vivi and Usopp waved back, while Kuru quacked and saluted Luffy with his wing before beginning to pace the deck. He was taking his duties very seriously. Once everyone got what they felt they needed for their escapade along the beach, Chopper packed medical supplies, Usopp packed extra ammo and weapons, Sanji packed food, etc. They had come to the realization that if they were all going on Operation Save the Future, this would leave the Going Merry completely unguarded. Usopp immediately offered to stay behind, until Zoro pointed out that if the bounty hunters showed up and he was all alone, he'd be dead meat. Usopp then had mysteriously come down with "I can't remain on the ship or I'll die" disease, causing Chopper to panic and rifle through his medical books trying to find a cure. After much debate and convincing the little reindeer that Usopp's disease didn't exist, and drawing some straws, it was decided that Vivi, Kuru, and Usopp, who drew the long straw by pure coincidence, would be staying behind to guard the Going Merry. Think Vivi and Kuru will be okay on their own? Sanji asked as Luffy ran to the front of the group. What about Usopp? Chopper asked. He was in walk point so he could carry extra supplies. Him too, I guess. They should be fine, Roronoa replied. Bounty hunters usually only go after people with bounties. Vivi doesn't have one, and you wouldn't be able to recognize Usopp based on his poster. If we're lucky, they should just ignore them. I wasn't asking you, bigger sword free, Sanji began. Roronoa's words then registered with him. Wait a minute. Usopp has a bounty in the future? Usopp? Roronoa glanced at Luffy. That's okay, Luffy said, understanding the glance. I expect all of my crewmates to have bounties any day now. Just don't tell us when he got it or how much it is, alright? Roronoa nodded. Aye, Captain. Usopp, Sanji repeated. Has a bounty, Usopp. Saying it over and over isn't going to make it any less true, Cook, Zoro said irritably. Sanji still looked incredulous as he walked along the sand. What the heck did he do? Roronoa smirked. That would be telling. Do I have bounty poster yet? The elder swordsman stopped walking and stared at Sanji for a long time. He seemed ready to answer the question, but then he shook his head. Nope, Roronoa said to himself, grinning as he began walking again. Zoro recognized it as his, I know something you don't, and it is freaking hilarious grin. Even I'm not that cruel. Hey, what's with that stupid grin? Sanji shouted. Come on, you don't have to tell how much it is. I just want to know if I have one. Roronoa. Roronoa started to laugh, ignoring Sanji's shouting. Zoro knew himself well enough to know his counterpart wasn't laughing at Sanji's frustration, but at the idea of Sanji's poster. Dang it, he has all this great material against the cook, Zoro thought bitterly. I know Luffy ordered to stop asking about the future, but now I really want to know about that stupid poster. Zoro then realized he was now walking pretty close to Roronoa, so he sped up until he was walking next to Luffy. The search party walked in relative silence for a while after that. Other than passing large mossy rocks that popped up along the beach every now and then, there wasn't really much to see except the ocean, the rest of the beach, and the jungle to their right. Luffy stretched his arm out at one point to snatch a branch, just so he could use it as a walking stick. At least the weather was nice, and the sun showed no signs of setting. Of course, this didn't change fact just walking quietly was boring, and when the situation got boring. Oh, the island in the south are warm, Luffy sang off key. And their heads get really hot. They grow at pineapples, they grow at coconuts. And they're morons. The crew winced, Chopper had even flattened his ears against his hat. Luffy really was a horrible singer. Next verse, Luffy announced, waving his walking stick. Oh, the islands in the north are snowy, and their heads get really cold. Luffy, Nami interrupted. If we actually talk about something, will you promise not to sing? Okay, Luffy agreed. What do you want to talk about? I think I may have a topic, Roronoa said. Is it true you guys heard voices in the fog when you first came here? That had come so out of nowhere, It took a few seconds to register with the present Straw Hats. "We did," Chopper said at last, slowly. "We thought they were ghosts, until Nami and Sanji heard voices of people they recognized." "Why do you ask?" Nami asked. "Didn't your crew hear voices as well?" "No, we didn't hear anything when we passed through the fog," Roronoa replied. He paused. "Well, unless you count the sound of Usopp hyperventilating, but that's hardly out of the ordinary." "How did you know we heard voices if you didn't hear any yourself?" Sanji asked suspiciously. "We never talked about it in front of you." Roronoa jerked his thumb towards his younger self. The crew turned to look at Zoro. Zoro rubbed the back of his neck. "I may have brought it up during a discussion we had the other night. Didn't know it was supposed to be a secret." To his credit, it wasn't like it's supposed to be a secret. It was just that most of the crew had been trying not to think about the voices after hearing their own speak within the rainbow fog. Especially so with Zoro, so they were a little shocked that he had brought it up of all people. "The voices were really annoying at first," Luffy said. "They said we were weak and had no pride, that we were powerless, and that desert sand would bury us." The voice that said that last part sounded just like Crocodile, Sanji pointed out. "You thought he was a ghost for a minute there." "Crocodile was still alive last I saw him," Roronoa said. "If you want to call that living. Anyway, what else did you hear?" "After Crocodile, it was just a bunch of random phrases," Nami answered. "It was more like parts of sentences, actually. As if the fog were breaking into the middle of the voices' sentences. Then we heard Hachin's voice." "Hachi's voice?" Roronoa asked, sounding somewhat surprised. "What was he saying?" Nami's eyes widened and she stumbled mid-step before regaining her balance. Did Roronoa just refer to that octopus fish man as Hachi? It was Hachin's nickname, true, but the only people he let call him that were his close friends. "Nami dear?" Sanji said. He placed a hand on her shoulder. "Are you okay? You look a little pale." "Nami's pale?" Luffy gasped. "Oh no, is she sick again?" "Maybe we should head back to the Mary and have Chopper give her a checkup," Zoro suggested seriously. Chopper immediately went into doctor mode. Red. Frantic brainpoint, jumping around Nami and telling her to sit down so he could make sure she hadn't relapsed from the Kestia. Which, if Kureha had been there to tell him, was impossible. He was still new to the crew, and therefore wanted to make sure he didn't fail in his duties as doctor. "Guys," Nami broke in. "I'm not sick, I'm perfectly fine." "You sure?" Luffy asked. "I'm sure," she confirmed. "If I were feeling sick, I'd tell you, I promise." By this point, her color had returned and she did look healthy, so the crew had no problem believing her. "Okay," Chopper said, calming down and helping Sanji pick up the supplies he, Chopper, dropped. "You'd better keep that promise and tell me if you start feeling ill again, alright?" Nami nodded. "I'll keep my promise, don't worry. Now that that's taken care of, where were we?" "You were about to tell me what Hachi's voice said in the fog," Roronoa reminded her. Nami swallowed the lump that had formed in her throat. "Right. If I recall correctly, he was saying something about somebody promising something. It had to do if they saw someone shot before their eyes." Nami remembered that tone Hachin's voice was using. If he hadn't been one of her tormentors for the last 8 years, she might have felt sorry for him. The navigator was so wrapped up in her thoughts that she didn't notice that Roronoa had ceased walking. Everyone else stopped as well once they noticed, though Sanji had to tap Nami on the shoulder to get her attention. "Zoro-san, why'd you stop?" Luffy asked. "Yeah, you were the one who wanted to start searching so badly," Zoro said, crossing his arms. Roronoa ignored the other two, instead focusing on Nami. "Nami, were Hachi's exact words, you promised, that even if someone was shot before your eyes, you would not lay a hand on them." Nami raised an eyebrow. "How did you know that?" The octopus's voice said the first part, but where did that second part come from? Sanji asked. Roronoa didn't reply. "Quick, tell me something else," one of the voices said. "Okay," Nami said slowly. I think Vivi told me she heard a woman's voice cry out, 'I want to live.' Take me with you, take me away from here." Roronoa finished for her. He bit his thumbnail. "Damn it. How is this possible?" "Whoa, Zoro-san. How do you keep doing that?" Luffy asked excitedly. He turned to Zoro. "Why didn't you tell me you were psycho?" "I thought that was a given," Sanji snickered. "Shut up," Arrow cook, Zoro barked. If I'm psycho, then at least I'm not whip pervert like you. What did you call me, Mosshead? You heard me, dartboard. Take it back. Make me. Sanji aimed a kick at Zoro's face. Zoro deflected it with his sword, and it all went downhill from there. While the cook and swordsman exchanged blows, Chopper spoke up. Luffy, I think you mean psychic, not psycho, am I correct? Luffy nodded. Yeah, that. Roronoa watched his younger self fight Sanji, sweat dropping. You know, now that I'm the one watching this for once, I can see how this can get kind of annoying. Not that he would change his habits anytime soon. That cook was just too annoying to not fight all the time. Besides, if he didn't fight the cook, then that pervert would call him a scaredy cat and never let him hear the end of it. Choosing not to fight younger Sanji didn't count. Roronoa didn't fight people that much weaker than him unless the situation demanded it. Don't just change the subject. How do you know what the voices said? Nami shouted. She then turned on her heel and pounded her fists into the dueling men's heads, sending them plowing into the sand. And would you stop fighting and pay attention? Yes, Nami my swan, damn it, woman, stop hitting us all the time. Chopper hid behind Luffy, while Luffy laughed at the scene. Roronoa just continued to sweat drop. Once Sanji and Zoro were back on their feet, it was also back to the matter at hand. You didn't answer my question or Nami's, Zoro-san, Luffy said. How do you keep guessing what those voices were saying? And how do you know what they were going to say afterwards? It's really freaky. I'm not guessing anything, Roronoa admitted, crossing his arms. I know what they're going to say because I was there when those respective voices said them. Or more accurately, when the people those voices belonged to said them. I don't how, but I think what you guys were hearing were things that were said to you in the future. What? The crew yelled collectively. How can that be? Chopper asked. We heard our voices too. I heard myself say I was going to be a more reliable man. My voice was calling somebody flighty and scolding them for not considering how others feel, Nami said. Usopp's fog voice said this place wasn't hell, Luffy added. And my fog voice was asking somebody what made them a god. I sounded really pissed. I don't know about Nami's, but I do know Usopp's and Chopper's, and I can guess Luffy's by context, Roronoa said. What about what my voice said? Zoro asked. I told you about it last night, recognize that. Roronoa narrowed his eye. Seeing how your voice is also my voice, I think I know what situation I was in when I said that. Luffy remembered what Zoro's fog voice said. Can't even protect my captain, then my ambition is. Luffy frowned a little. Zoro's ambition was what? He promised Zoro he'd never get in the way of that. So if Zoro really said that in the future, what did it mean for their vow? Roronoa noticed his young captain's frown and clapped a hand on his shoulder, which was Zoro talk for, don't worry about it. The younger swordsman scowled at his older self's gesture but did nothing to interrupt it. Luffy looked like he needed it. By this time, some clouds had rolled across the sky and blocked out the sun, dimming the area quite considerably. It fit, considering how dismal the atmosphere had become in the last few minutes. And after we heard our voices, it got really disturbing, Sanji went on. There were still other voices, but only one really stood out. The things it said were very troubling. Yeah, Nami agreed. She looked at Luffy. If these really are voices of the future, I can only wonder why Ace's voice was saying those things. Do you think he gets into some kind of... Hold on a second, Roronoa broke in. Did you say, Ace? Don't interrupt Nami, you uncouth. Sanji started to rant. Cook, shut up, Roronoa said sternly. Sanji did shut up, the authority and stern tone in the swordsman's voice preventing him from arguing. This is important, Roronoa continued. Did I just hear you say, Ace? Ace is the name of Luffy's big brother, Chopper explained. He told us about him after we set foot on the island. I know who Ace is, Roronoa snapped, and then immediately felt bad when he saw Chopper's frightened expression. Sorry. I meant I do know who he is, but I'm surprised that you all know. Huh? Why's that? Luffy asked. Your crew shouldn't know about Ace yet. We didn't know your future self even had siblings until he told us about him in Nanohana. That's the city Vivi said we'd visit first when we arrived in Alabasta, Nami remembered. That doesn't sound right, Zoro said. Luffy told us about him just the other day. Why would I forget by the time we arrived in Alabasta? And why would I also forget coming to a freaked-up island between Drum and Alabasta? Roronoa countered. It's because I didn't forget. These things didn't happen. At least they didn't before. What, are you saying because we all came to this island, history is being changed somehow? Chopper asked. How do you come up with that? Roronoa asked. He shook his head. Never mind, because it actually makes sense. Despite my efforts and Luffy's orders, you are going to learn about the future, and the fact you know might change what decisions you make later in your journey. Different decisions, different outcomes, Sanji added reluctantly. So it's a mystery effect, Luffy concluded. No one bothered to correct Luffy, because just like with the Mystery Island, he was right. It's the only logical explanation, Nami said. Unless Roronoa and his crew just miraculously forgot everything once they left the island. Sanji glanced at Zoro and Luffy. I wouldn't put it beneath certain members of our crew. Shut up, Cook, Zoro said. He turned to his counterpart. You looked kind of spooked there when Nami said Ace's name. It's not that surprising, is it? Roronoa just shrugged. He didn't really look like he wanted to talk about it. Do we meet Ace in Alabasta? Luffy asked suddenly. Is that why I tell you guys about him? Roronoa raised an eyebrow. Wouldn't telling you be going against? Just tell me, Luffy snapped. Okay, yes, we do meet him in Alabasta. Roronoa answered. We were heading in the same direction, so he traveled with us for a couple days before leaving, that's it. Luffy, what's your problem? Nami scolded. You didn't have to snap at him like that. Luffy's brow furrowed as he ignored Nami and thought back to his dream. So they did meet in Ace in Alabasta. Or at least they were going to. His dream must have been Abbott. How was that possible? He hadn't experienced it yet, so how would he know what would happen, even if it was a dream? Zoro-san, he began. Did Ace, Luffy. Time. A good 15 to 20 minutes earlier. Location. The Going Merry Vivi, as anyone who knew her could tell you, was something of a worrywart. She worried at Whiskey Peak, she worried on Little Garden, and she worried heavily on Drum Island. With good reason. This time was no different. She paced the deck alongside Karoo, worrying about her friends who had gone off in search of the future Mr. Bushido's ship. Usopp looked up from his chemistry set. He was making extra ammo in the case of an attack. Would you stop pacing? You're going to make a rut in the deck and I don't want to have to fix it. I'm sorry, Vivi apologized, though she continued to pace. I'm just a little on edge. I hope the others make it to Mr. Roronoa's ship safely. You're worried about them? They have Luffy, Sanji, and 2 Zoros with them, Usopp said as he began to clean up his supplies. If you should be worried about anyone, be worried about us. If the bounty hunters come here, we're pretty much screwed. Vivi stopped pacing and crossed her arms. I thought you were a brave warrior of the sea. I am, Usopp said proudly. He began to shake in fear. I just want to live long enough to continue being one. I've spent 2 years among bounty hunters. They usually ignore those without bounties, so if we're lucky, we'll be just fine. That makes me feel so much better. Vivi sighed and sat down on the deck. Karoo got down behind her so she could lean back on him. She began to absently rub her hair between her fingers. Usopp gave her a concerned look. Are you okay? Of course, she replied a little too quickly. Why do you ask? He shrugged. No reason, it's just you seem a little off is all. She chuckled weakly. Is it that obvious? Kind of. You're a chatty worrier, and you've been unnaturally quiet this whole time. He thought about it. Oh, does it have to do with Alabasta? Helping Roronoa is really cutting into the time we have to get there? Vivi gave him a smile. Looks like you and Nami think alike. She said the same thing to me before we went to sleep last night. Usopp sat down across from her. Well, does it? A little, but I'll tell you what I told Nami. Past or future, Mr. Roronoa is my friend and I want to help him out. Still, the sooner we find his friends, the better. I'm with you on that, Usopp agreed. Although I have defeated many a bounty hunter in the past, I could handle ones from the New World. It's best we find our future selves before the hunters find us. The sniper noticed Vivi was chewing on her lip. But that's not your reason, is it? Vivi shook her head. No, it's not. I've also been thinking about what will happen when we arrive in Alabasta. Roronoa said we beat Crocodile, but... well, that doesn't necessarily mean we stop the actual rebellion. Vivi, it's going to be fine. Usopp assured her. You just have to tell them Crocodile is behind all the bad stuff and they'll stop, right? But what if I can't do that? Vivi shouted, jumping to her feet. And what about you guys? You're risking your lives helping me. I know none of you die given Mr. Roronoa's description of his crew. But who knows what could happen there? Look at Mr. Roronoa. He's missing an eye. For all we know, he could have lost it in Alabasta. Don't you think you're getting a little ahead of yourself? Usopp asked, also standing up. Anyway, I don't think Roronoa's eye was blinded in Alabasta, and even if it was, he seems to manage just fine without it. Yes, but Vivi started to argue. Just calm down and stop worrying, okay? Usopp went on. Luffy promised he'd help, and he keeps his promises. Like, 95% of the time. But he usually keeps them. Also, you're our friend. If you weren't, we wouldn't even be bothering. He slumped a little. Besides, you're not the only one who's afraid of failing the people they care about. Vivi frowned. I couldn't help but notice, but you've also been kind of off today. Not to mention you've been acting strange around Luffy. Is there a problem? You'd think I was crazy. Try me. Usopp sighed and rubbed the back of his neck. I haven't been meaning to act strange around Luffy, but it has to do with this dream I had last night. A dream? Vivi repeated. Usopp nodded and described it to her. It was nighttime. The dark sky was overcast, and Usopp was surrounded by a rocky landscape. In the distance behind him, there was a large city. To the side, the ocean and the Going Merry. He winced. The Merry looked horrible. She was just barely being held together by metal plates and mismatched planks. What had happened to her? He could also see Sanji, Nami, Chopper, and Zoro standing on the deck. Nami looked distraught. Zoro looked distant. Sanji was scowling. And Chopper looked like he was ready to start crying. What was going on? And where was Luffy? Gum gum. Pistol. Usopp turned in time to see Luffy. Despite there being smoke everywhere, he was performing one of his signature attacks. Only that attack was coming straight towards him. He tried to call out his captain's name, but found he couldn't make his lips move. Usopp had seen Luffy use this attack on many enemies before, but never had he ever been subject to it. The rubber fist rammed into his jaw, sending him flying across the ground, and damn, did it hurt. It was just then Usopp realized his entire body hurt. He was covered in so many bandages he looked like a mummy. Not that Luffy looked much better. The rubber captain was covered in burns, scratches, and blood. Why were they both hurt this bad? Why was Luffy attacking him out of nowhere like this? Luffy ran forward, stretching both of his arms behind him. It's time to put an end to this, Luffy growled. Gum gum, bazooka. Usopp felt his body stand up and hold up what looked like a little pink shell. Why was his body moving on its own? The bazooka hit the shell, and all of a sudden, all the force seemed to vanish from Luffy's attack. Usopp was surprised, and Luffy looked doubly so. Recognize this? He heard himself say. His lips were moving on their own as well. Why did his voice sound so angry? I bet that bazooka would have hurt. Let's find out. Usopp ran forward and placed the shell right in front of Luffy's face. Impact. Usopp wasn't sure how, but the shell seemed to release the force it had absorbed from Luffy's bazooka. Luffy went flying backward, blood spraying from his mouth. It took all of Usopp's willpower not to scream, for he had now officially lost all feeling in his arm. He ended up screaming anyway. He felt his body seize up, and he screamed out, I won't lose to you. Usopp was dumbfounded by his own words. Were he and Luffy were in some kind of duel? Why would they do that? Luffy was his best friend. He wouldn't fight him for no reason. Luffy wasn't down for long. He was soon back up on his feet, though he was breathing very hard. Usopp got on his feet also, struggling with every movement. Luffy stretched his arm backward as far as it would go. Gum gum. Luffy cried out. Bullet. Luffy's fist plowed into Usopp's stomach. The sniper didn't go flying, but he did cough up blood. Luffy. He thought. Why? Why are we fighting? You're my friend, damn it. He fell forward, landing on his face. The dream, and how he desperately hoped it really was one, began to fade out. Right before it did, he heard Luffy muttering. You idiot, his captain whispered. You knew it would end like this. You knew you could never beat me. Usopp didn't reply. The last thing he remembered was the sound of Luffy's voice, sounding on the verge of tears. Usopp took a long, shuddery breath as he finished recounting the events of his dream. "Oh, Usopp," Vivi whispered sympathetically. "And now whenever I look at Luffy, his last words in my dream replay in my head." Usopp sighed. He sat down on a barrel and ran his fingers over his bandana. "I can see how," Vivi said. "I may not have been traveling with you guys for long, but even I can see how close you all are. So to fight someone you care about like that. What gets me is I don't know what we were fighting about," Usopp went on. "Going off what Luffy said at the end, I'm pretty sure I was the one who instigated the duel. What could have occurred that would make me angry enough to challenge my best friend to a fight I know I'm going to lose? Did I fail him somehow? Or did he fail me? I have to know. Nothing has occurred, nobody has failed anyone, and you clearly have no intention of challenging Luffy to anything," Vivi pointed out. "It was just a bad dream." "That's just it. Remember when I said you'd think I was crazy if told you about my dream? Yes. Here's the crazy part. I don't think it was just a dream. It felt too real to be one." Vivi's eyes widened. "Are you saying you think it was a memory?" Usopp shrugged. "That's my best theory, but it's a flawed one. I think I would remember something so awful." He rested his chin in his palm. "But some details of my dream stuck out to me. You weren't there, but Chopper was. The Mary was badly damaged, and we were next to a city I had never seen before." When mentioning the Mary, Vivi noticed an almost pained expression grace Usopp's features. "You're worried about the Mary too?" she asked. Usopp nodded. "Yeah, I guess I am. It was bad enough seeing her in that state in my nightmare, but I've also been thinking back to when Roronoa first woke up." Vivi knew what he meant. Mr. Roronoa asked if anything happened before his crew brought him back to the Sunny. "The Thousand Sunny," Usopp added grimly. "Sounds like the name of a ship to me." Karoo, sensing his princess's friend's distress, scooted up next to him and nuzzled him. Usopp scratched under the duck's bill appreciatively. Vivi, Karoo, and Usopp were currently sitting pretty close to the figurehead. Vivi reached over and ran her hand over the adorable lamb's head. She had grown fond of this little ship. The thought of the Straw Hat Pirates losing it saddened her. With that on top of his nightmare, she was surprised the sniper wasn't a complete wreck. She was about to attempt comforting Usopp when she suddenly heard something. "No sake wo, todok ni yuku yo. Yumika's kimikase." "Usopp," Vivi whispered. "Did you hear that?" Usopp looked up from his brooding. "Hear what?" "Just listen." Usopp grew quiet, as did Karoo. As Vivi predicted, the sound returned. "No muko da, yuhi mo sawagu. Sora nya wa wokaku, tori no uta." "It sounds like singing," Usopp said the time it faded out. Vivi pointed to the jungle. "It's coming from over there." Usopp and Vivi shared a quick glance. "No way," Usopp hollered, forming an X with his arms. "We are not going in there to check it out." "But Usopp, it could be one of Mr. Roronoa's crewmates," Vivi reasoned. "And it could be one of the bounty hunters. A bounty hunter wouldn't be randomly singing, a member of Luffy's crew would." "Touché. It's just a quick peek," she insisted. "We'll be in and out, just like that." Usopp fell off the barrel and onto the deck, lying on his back and grasping at his throat. "Oh no, it's my I can't go ashore or I'll die disease. I don't think I can make it, Vivi." Vivi rolled her eyes. Usopp could be such a drama queen. "Fine. I'll just go with Karoo and leave you all alone on the ship." Usopp thought for a moment that she may have been bluffing, but sure enough, Vivi hopped on Karoo's back and jumped from the Mary and onto the beach. Usopp was all alone on the Mary. "If she thinks she can scare me into coming, she's got another thing coming," Usopp muttered. "I am the great Captain Usopp. I can handle being alone on the ship." As soon as he said that, clouds rolled over the sky, blocking out the sun and darkening the deck quite a bit. On top of that, the wind picked up and there were odd, scratching noises coming from the jungle. A screeching noise that sounded like some big, ugly bird echoed across the ship. That was the last straw. "Vivi, wait for me, stop smiling like that. I don't know what you're talking about. You just stay there on your duck. I didn't come here because I was scared. I came here to protect you." "I appreciate the sentiment." With the sun now behind the clouds, the jungle had grown extremely dark. Usopp walked closely next to the mounted duck, aiming his slingshot in random directions. So far, their little search wasn't very successful. "I don't see anyone," Vivi observed. "I'm sure this is where the singing was coming from." They walked a bit farther. The jungle was now getting a little misty too. At least it wasn't rainbow-colored. "Hey, Vivi?" Usopp piped up. "Yes, Usopp?" Vivi responded. "I just had a thought," he whispered nervously. "What if the reason we can't find who was singing is because it was a ghost?" Vivi ordered Karoo to halt, and she gave Usopp a slightly exasperated look. "Don't tell me you still think this island is haunted?" "I'm just tossing around ideas," Usopp insisted. "This island already has a backward sense of time. Why not throw the living dead into the mix?" Backward senses of time and the living dead have nothing to do with each other. "You don't know that, and neither do you." Vivi sighed. "Honestly, Usopp, and you say I'm a warrior. I think the worst we have to be concerned about on this island are the bounty hunters. There are no living dead on this." "Yo-ho-ho-ho. Usopp-san." A voice interrupted from out of nowhere. "I thought I recognized your voice." Vivi, Usopp, and Karoo turned in time to see a figure step out from the bushes, and what they saw. "I'm happy to have finally located a familiar face," the figure said jovially. "I'm afraid I got myself a little lost. This island is quite confusing. Have you noticed the odd sunsets and sunrises? When I saw that sunset so early in the day, my eyes nearly bugged right of my head. Not that I have eyes. Yo-ho-ho-ho." Vivi, Usopp, and Karoo said nothing. Their minds were still trying to process the sight before them. "Oh," the figure went on, taking notice of the blue-haired princess. "And who would this lovely lady be?" The figure was impossibly tall, over 9 feet. It wore a trim back coat, a blue cravat, a flashy orange feather boa, floral print pants, fancy pink sunglasses, and a white hat that seemed to be combined with a crown. It had hair, a large black afro in fact. But that was the only thing remotely human about it. It already said it didn't have eyes. Only empty sockets. It didn't have ears, a nose, or any flesh for that matter. Vivi and Usopp stared up in horror. This thing was It was a. "Excuse me, miss," the tall skeleton before them said, leaning towards Vivi. "Would you be so kind as to show me your panties?" "I.e." Vivi and Usopp shrieked, "Pervert zombie." "Ah!" The skeleton shrieked back, looking from side to side. "Where?" "Time. Present, relatively speaking, location. A ways down the beach of Kala." After divulging a few details about Ace, Roronoa was starting to look somewhat uncomfortable. Roronoa, who was Zoro, looked uncomfortable. Even if it was only slightly and barely detectable, Zoro, past or present, never looked uncomfortable about anything, unless one counted the last 45 minutes, during which Zoro looked uncomfortable whenever he got too close to his older self, called the crew crazy. But they partially suspected he was uncomfortable with talking about Ace. "Zoro-osan," Luffy began. "Did Ace, Luffy?" The crew turned around to see Vivi and Usopp riding down the beach on Karoo. The sniper and the princess had identical terrified expressions on their faces. Usopp looked so scared that tears of fear were streaming down his face. Seeing them instantly pushed the subject of Ace out of their minds. They had their friends to worry about at the moment. "Vivi, Usopp," Nami called out. "Vivi-chan," Sanji shouted out, jogging over to meet them. "Zoro, Roronoa, Luffy," named after him. Vivi yanked on Karoo's reins and the duck skidded to a stop. Unfortunately, the sudden force caused Usopp to go flying off the saddle. Luckily for him, Roronoa caught him and immediately set him back up on his feet. "Thanks," Usopp said, sounding out of breath. "No problem," Roronoa replied. Sanji helped Vivi dismount, for she was too shaky to do it on her. The blonde cook took the princess's hand in his own. "Vivi-chan, are all right? Why aren't you still on the Mary?" "I'm here too, you know," Usopp shouted indignantly. Sanji, of course, ignored him and went on right trying to soothe Vivi. "Was it the bounty hunters?" Chopper gasped. "Are you guys hurt?" "The bounty hunters showed up?" Luffy asked. "And I missed it? Darn it." "It wasn't bounty hunters," Vivi said slowly. "It was much, much worse." "Did the Marines show up?" Zoro asked. "A hand on one of his swords? Or Baroque works?" "Even worse than that." Vivi continued. What's worse than the Marines, Baroque works, or New World bounty hunters? Nami asked. It must have been bad, if it was enough to make them abandon the going merry. Vivi and Usopp looked at each other before yelling, a zombie. A zombie? The Straw Hats yelled back. I told you this place was haunted, I told you so, Usopp said, his legs knocking together furiously. He was on the verge of a panic attack. But did you listen to me? Does anyone ever listen to me? We went into the jungle because we thought it might be one of Mr. Roronoa's crewmates, but then it just appeared. Vivi explained. It was awful. I didn't think zombies existed, but now. A real live zombie? Chopper said. That's medically impossible. This is an amazing discovery, totally scary, but amazing. A zombie? Luffy repeated with a large grin. Awesome. Was he a musician? Nami grabbed Luffy by the ear and hollered, a zombie is not joining our crew. But Zoro said if the zombie happened to be a musician, we could take him into consideration, Luffy whined, rubbing his ear. If Moss had said it was okay, then we're definitely not doing it, Sanji shouted. He held Vivi close. Besides, that zombie assaulted my precious Vivi Kwan. If I see it, I'm sending it back to the grave. Vivi looked up at Sanji, then gently pushed him away. He remained standing close to her though. It attacked Usopp too, Zoro pointed out. Karoo quacked loudly. Everyone was forgetting about him again. It technically didn't attack us, Usopp admitted. We made a break for it before it could. See, it didn't attack them, Luffy said happily. So now we can ask it to join our crew. What do you think, Zoro-san? Roronoa was standing off to the side, trying to rub away an oncoming headache through his temples. Zoro-san? Luffy said again, only more quizzically. Zombies, Roronoa muttered. Brilliant. For once, I'd love to come to an island enshrouded with fog without there being zombies involved. Wait, you mean you've encountered zombies before? Nami asked. Unfortunately, he replied. Let's just say it wasn't a good day and leave it at that. Zoro was mildly surprised. He'd said it would be interesting to fight zombies back when they first entered the fog. He didn't actually think he would ever get the chance to do so for real. Though, Roronoa didn't sound too thrilled. Then you should know all about defeating them, Usopp said hopefully. Please tell us how, Mr. Roronoa, Vivi pleaded. I want that thing gone. Not only was it really scary, it was completely perverted. Who does it think it is, asking me such an inappropriate question? Roronoa stopped rubbing his temples. Pardon? The zombie was a pervert as well? Sanji gasped. Vivi Kwan, I swear I will find this zombie and kick it so hard it'll wish it was still alive just so it could die again. I don't get it, Chopper said. How can zombies be perverts? Even if they can move around, their ability for higher thinking would be heavily impaired due to rotting brain tissue. You've actually thought about this? Zoro asked the little reindeer. Vivi? Roronoa broke in, stepping in front of the princess. May I ask you a couple questions? Of course, Vivi agreed. What are they? This zombie. By any chance was he more of a skeleton than an actual zombie? Yes, he was. He didn't have any flesh whatsoever. Was he dressed in really flashy clothing? I guess. The feather boa was a little much. Did he have an afro? He did, but how did you know? Luffy's eyes widened. The zombie has an afro too? He chuckled gleefully. She. That's so cool, now I really wanted to join the crew. What does it having a stupid afro have to do with anything? Nami shouted. Hey, never disrespect an afro, Usopp declared. He crossed his arms. It's a widely known fact afros hold untold power. This zombie will be quite the adversary indeed. Really? Chopper asked. I've never heard of such a thing. Zoro's sweat dropped. This conversation only got weirder and weirder. Last question, Roronoa continued, ignoring the afro discussion. That inappropriate thing he asked you. By any chance was it if he could see her? He looked away, rubbing his neck. Panties. Roronoa's other hand flew up immediately after he said this, just in time to once again catch Sanji's foot. Damn it. Roronoa. Sanji ground out, nearly biting his cigarette in half. Let me kick you for crying out loud. Stop being so predictable, and maybe I'll let you. Roronoa deadpanned, pushing the offending foot away. Sanji stumbled a bit, but quickly regained his footing. Apologize for saying such a crude thing to Vivi, you clod. Hey, the skeleton was the one who originally said it, not me, the elder swordsman shrugged. He turned back to Vivi. Well, was that his question? Vivi and Usopp stared at Roronoa, gaping and looking very much like fish. How did he know that was the question it asked? It was a totally random and unpredictable question. I'm going to take your dumbfounded expressions as a yes, Roronoa said. He sighed and facepalmed. That idiot. Way to make a first impression. Zoro-san, do you know this talking Afro zombie? Luffy asked. He sounds really interesting. A perverted zombie isn't interesting, Nami argued. She turned to Roronoa. But seriously, do you know this zombie? I do, unfortunately, Roronoa sighed again. Sorry about him asking that question. It's kind of a habit of his, no amount of knocks to the head will break. You see, he froze mid-sentence, and absently cocked his ear up a little. Roronoa? Nami asked. Roronoa's eye widened. He leapt forward, knocking the crew away. Get down. Not a second later, the sand where the Straw Hats had previously been standing exploded. Several areas of the beach nearby exploded as well. It was only due to Roronoa's reflexes that they were pushed out of the way in time and avoided being blown to smithereens. Roronoa jumped to his feet and drew two of his swords, Kitetsu and the black one. He said during breakfast it was called Shisui. Now that the Straw Hats were paying attention, they could see what had caused the explosion. Something was firing cannonballs at them. As cannonballs got close, Roronoa effortlessly sliced them in two and the remaining halves went flying into the woods, exploding harmlessly. Now that he knew what he was up against, Luffy got up as well and joined his future swordsman's side. Gum gum. Luffy began, inhaling deeply, balloon. Luffy's body inflated until he was indeed as fat and round as a balloon. The cannonballs that hit him were immediately sent flying back in the direction they came. Where are these coming from? Sanji shouted. He was still on the ground, shielding Nami with his body. Karoo had Vivi and Chopper covered. Zoro jumped to his feet as well and joined his older self and Luffy in deflecting cannon fire. Usopp stood up as far as he dared and lowered one of his goggles lenses. After a moment or two, he spotted the source of the cannonballs. Over there, beyond that cove, Usopp announced. And just in time too. The cannonballs ceased as a large ship emerged from around the cove, sailing perfectly despite the shallow waters. It was an incredibly large ship, about the size of the average galleon. The upper exterior of the ship was covered in thick steel plates, most likely for protection, and the figurehead resembled a snarling ape. Cannons lined the rails, and the people manning them looked downright sadistic. On the sails and flag, there was a Jolly Roger that resembled a broken skull. Printed next to the broken skull was the image of a gun. Geez, why not just paint the words "We kill pirates" in big honking letters on the sails? It wouldn't be half as obvious. Sanji helped the girls and Chopper up, then they along with Usopp ran up to join Luffy, who had deflated, and the swordsman. Roronoa snarled. I recognize that flag. This is the ship that was chasing us when we got caught in that current. T their bounty H hunters? Usopp stuttered. From T the New W world? Zoro-san, Luffy said softly. He cracked his knuckles. Can we fight them? I haven't decided yet, Roronoa replied softly. Only his soft voice had a dangerous edge to it. Give me a minute to see what we're up against. My first fight as a real pirate, Chopper whispered excitedly. He looked up at Usopp. What should I do to help? Usopp gulped and pulled out his slingshot. I'll tell you as soon as I figure it out myself. Sanji shushed them. The ship was approaching. As the ship got closer to the shore, large grappling hooks were fired from the figurehead's mouth, latching onto the trees in the jungle behind the crew. The loud cranking sound that followed revealed that the ship was being dragged closer to the beach. It wasn't long before the giant ship was partially on the pink sand, and someone was standing on top of the figurehead. The ship was so big that the crew was forced to look straight up to see whoever it was standing there. It was an extremely muscular man with a shaved head and way too many tattoos. He had a broad axe slung across his back, and brass knuckles on each hand. He smiled smugly down at the pirates. Well, what do we have here? Tattoos asked sardonically, yelling down to them. We were given orders to find a pirate ship, and instead we come across the actual pirates. What luck. Zoro grit his teeth. So these clowns were actually looking for them, huh? A man carrying papers walked up next to tattoos on the figurehead. We've identified most of them, sir. Good, Tattoos said with a nod. Read them off. The lackey nodded and started by pointing at Luffy. We have Straw Hat, Monkey D. Luffy. Luffy grinned. He loved his epithet. The lackey pointed at Roronoa. Pirate Hunter, Roronoa Zoro. Zoro glanced at his older self. His pirate epithet was Pirate Hunter? Would that title haunt him forever? Nami was pointed at next. Cat Burglar, Nami. The navigator's hands flew to her face. Not me too. Next was Chopper. Cotton candy loving, Chopper, their pet. Chopper's jaw dropped. I'm there. Pet? Sanji and Usopp snickered at the cutesy epithet. The lackey gestured towards Vivi and Kuru. Some blue-haired girl and her duck. Vivi breathed a sigh of relief. If she didn't have epithet, she didn't have a bounty. Then she realized that the fact the others had epithets meant they did have bounties. Oh dear. Usopp came up next. The lackey stared hard at the piece of paper he was holding. I'm not entirely sure who that guy is, but going off the nose, I'm assuming he's King of the Snipers, Sniper King without his mask on. Usopp's eyes widened. In the future, he was referred to as the King of the Snipers? The lackey finally got to Sanji, who actually looked excited to hear what his epithet was. However, the lackey gave the cook a blank stare. Something wrong? Tattoos asked. I have no idea who this dude is, the bounty hunter lackey admitted. Sanji looked like he'd been punched in the stomach. The stooge knew who everyone else was. Even the reindeer. Had that been the reason Roronoa laughed so hard? He was the only one without a bounty? Tattoos took the paper from his colleague and examined it. Well, he could be Black Leg, Sanji. They have the same curly eyebrow. Sanji perked up considerably. The lackey raised an eyebrow at the paper. If that's true, then the Navy really needs to update his photo. Or at least find someone who's a better artist. Roronoa made a quick snort that sounded like an attempt to hold back a laugh. And a bad one at that. Sanji vowed that orders or no orders, he would see what was so funny about his poster. The lackey then automatically gestured toward Zoro. And lastly, we have Roronoa Zoro? You counted him already, Tattoos pointed out. No sir, there's two of him. At those words, the other men on deck crowded to the front the ship so they too could see the second Roronoa Zoro. It seemed each man had something to say. Whoa, they look so much alike. Nah, the first one Charlie pointed out looks older. They both even have 3 swords. I didn't know the pirate hunter had a little brother. That guy is not my brother, Zoro hollered, waving his swords threateningly. That was right in my ear, you dolt, Nami hollered back, punching him the head. Tattoos shrugged and hefted his axe off his back. Whatever, brother or not, we're flexible. Although I don't see Devil Child, Cyborg, or Humming Swordsman here. There is still a good 643,050 bears worth in bounty before me. He pointed his axe at Luffy. Hope you don't mind if we collect it, Straw Hat. Luffy punched his fist into his hand. We'd like to see you try it, Tattoo Guy. No, we wouldn't. Usopp, Nami, and Vivi argued. I'll protect you. Nami Swan and Vivi Kwan. Sanji cooed. What about me? Usopp shouted at him. Hey, you'll be fine. I'll do my best, Luffy. Chopper said with a salute. I'll show them I'm not a pet. Finally, some action, Zoro grinned. Oi, Roronoa interrupted. You promised no fighting unless I gave the okay, so settle down. The meeker Straw Hats were more than happy to comply, but the more hard-headed ones, Luffy and Zoro, looked ready to start throwing punches. Sanji was too busy doting on the girls to form any solid opinion on the matter. Good, Tattoos laughed. I like my targets to have attitude and guts. I promised everyone else on this boat free reign with your crew. So you're getting a fight whether you want it or not. Our boss is gonna promote us for bringing in the infamous Straw Hat Pirates along with the treasure of Kala. Nami's eyes became berry signs. Treasure? Kala? Vivi thought. Is that the name of this island? It sounds familiar, but I can't put my finger on it. Oi, Straw Hat! One of the bounty hunters on the ship's deck shouted down. Yeah? Luffy answered. Don't answer him, Usopp loud whispered. I have a cousin in the Navy, he shouted. He said he saw you at Marineford. Since everyone was now paying attention to that lowly bounty hunter, they failed to notice the steely gaze reappear in Rorinoa's eye, as well as his forming snarl. Marineford? Luffy asked, confused. That's where Navy headquarters is, Vivi explained. It's right next to the Holy Land, Mariajoy. And Mariajoy is where the main base of the world government is, Nami added. Luffy nodded. Ah, I see. This was Luffy for, I don't really get it, but I'll pretend I do. So your cousin saw our crappy captain there, Sanji called up. This new subject was enough to pull him away from the girls, if but for a moment. So what? The bounty grinned maliciously down at the rubber boy. He wanted me to tell you. It was a nice effort, but you missed a spot. For some reason, this sent many of the ship's bounty hunters into speals of laughter, as if it were the funniest thing on the planet. Luffy didn't get it, of course. It was a mystery future thing. He could tell you that much. He didn't want to know what it meant because of that. Most aspects of his future adventures, he say. It was bad enough these guys spoiled his crew's future epithets for them. Seeing what name you got on the wanted poster was half the fun. He was about to tell them so, when the ship, which, I'll remind you, was a galleon, suddenly split in half. There was no warning or anything. 1 second the ship was in one piece and the bounty hunters were laughing. The next it was in 2 pieces and the crew was screaming. Especially those who got cut up along with the ship. Pieces of the ship went flying into the water or fell into the jungle, depending how far down on the sand that the part of the ship in question was, along with a good number of the bounty hunters. Tattoos and many others jumped off and onto beach just as the ship collapsed completely. Sadly, not many of the bounty hunters did not make it off in time. The pirates and princess stared at the scene before them in shock and awe. What just happened? Usopp wondered aloud. Good question, Nami said slowly, gaping. Chopper pointed a hoof at what the part of the ship remained. The point where it split. Look at that. It's like it's been cut by a giant knife or something. No way. Sanji said. Memories of the day Don Krieg attacked the Baratie came flooding into his mind. It's like that one time. What one time? Vivi asked. I once saw Hawkeye Mahawk cut this huge galleon in half with only a sword, the chef explained. It looked just like this. But, how? Vivi went on. Not only was it this giant ship, it had steel plates on the upper exterior. Who can cut steel that easily? Zoro's mouth had gone dry at sight of the demolished ship. Cutting a ship that big, and cutting through steel as well. These both were things he was not capable of, but he had no doubt Mahawk could do quite easily. But since the greatest swordsman in the world, at the moment, couldn't be possibly be on this island, who did that leave who could have done the deed? Hey guys. Luffy spoke up, though he was still marveling at the destroyed galleon. Where'd Zoro-san go? That was another good question. The future swordsman was nowhere in sight. Then all of a sudden, Karoo began quacking and pointing his wing to the side. When they looked in the direction the duck was gesturing to, that was when they found Rorinoa. Rorinoa was now a little farther down the beach. If the ship wasn't cut up and no longer on the beach all that much, he would have been on the other side of it. He had his back to the crew, and was slowly sliding Shisui back into its sheath. It was him. He was the one who cut the ship, Zoro thought. I can't even cut steel hard wax right now, much less cut a galleon in half. But this guy. Have I really grown so much in just 2 years? It's almost as if. Zoro's heart skipped a beat. Was it possible that in the future, he was already? Wow, Chopper whispered, interrupting the swordsman's thoughts. He looked up at Zoro admiringly. You are so cool. Zoro looked down at the reindeer. Just earlier that morning, Chopper had been as afraid of him as ever. Now all of a sudden, because of something Zoro's older self did, he was cool. What a weird little guy. Rorinoa turned and gave the surviving bounty hunters, there was still a good number of them, a snide grin. Sorry about that, he pretended to apologize. Your ugly ship was starting to bug me, so I decided I didn't want to look at it anymore. I hope I haven't inconvenienced you too badly. Tattoos was seething with rage. He raised his axe. You'll pay for that, pirate hunter. Nobody screws with the carrion bounty hunters and gets away with it. He pointed a finger at Rorinoa. Kill him. The bounty hunters charged with their respective weapons, but Rorinoa was ready for them. He turned away and quickly drew all three of his swords, placing the white one in his mouth. Rengoku, he said, crossing his swords in front of himself. Faster than you could blink, he turned back around and leapt forward towards the rushing bounty hunters. He cut through them, leaving X-shaped slashes of blood in his wake. Onigiri, the elder swordsman, finished. Many bounty hunters fell, but their still-standing comrades did nothing to aid them. Instead, they chose to try another attack at Roronoa. Roronoa waited until they got close before making his next move. Kokuho. Otatsamaki. The crew had seen their Zoro do this technique before, but never on this scale. The spinning motion accompanied with Roronoa's swords actually created a giant twister. Hunters screamed and bled as they were sent flying into the air, their weapons shattering from the cyclone of slashes. Awesome! Luffy, Usopp, and Chopper cheered. He's a monster, Nami whispered. Vivi nodded in agreement. That's our mosshead. Reckless to a fault, Sanji commented. If Zoro didn't know any better, he would said the cook sounded almost impressed. Tattoos was not amused, however. He jumped at Roronoa, heaving his axe down towards the swordsman's head. Roronoa guarded in time, and for the briefest of moments, the two were at a stalemate. Ah, Tattoos noted, pressing his axe down hard. You have haki, don't you? Roronoa gave his signature shark grin around the sword hilt in his mouth. Didn't think it'd be that obvious. Tattoos smirked. Several of our boss's higher-ups can use it adeptly. I'd recognize another user anywhere. Good to know. The dueling men managed to push the other off. Tattoos back towards his remaining men, and Roronoa back towards the Straw Hats. The clouds that had been blocking the sun got thicker, and it got darker. Some of the mist that had been forming in the jungle had leaked out onto the beach and water. Zoro-osan. Luffy said once Roronoa back next to them again. That was amazing. You've gotten so much stronger. Roronoa gave him a smile. I appreciate the compliment, Captain. So, can we fight? How did I know you were going to ask me that? Roronoa closed his eye for a second, then it opened it again. I think you should be able to handle the cronies. Just leave Tattoo Guy to me. Luffy cheered, and the other began to take battle stances. Nami assembled her bow staff. Vivi pulled out her peacock slashers, and Usopp aimed, with shaking hands, his slingshot. Chopper had a rumble ball ready. Sanji lifted his leg into kicking position, and Zoro pulled out his own 3 swords. Ready? Roronoa asked his captain. Luffy nodded. Yash. Tattoo Guy lifted his axe again and addressed his men. I don't care if their bounties drop 30%. I want them all pushing up daisies, you hear? Yes, sir. The bounty hunters chorused. It was a standoff, with both sides ready to throw the first attack. And they would have too, if it weren't for a sudden shout of Yo-ho-ho-ho. Zoro-san, Vivi and Usopp went rigid, they knew that voice. The bounty hunters parted as they turned to look at the speaker, and the Straw Hats could clearly see the flashily dressed skeleton standing behind their opponents. That's it, Usopp shouted. That's the zombie. How did it find us already? Vivi cried out. And how did it get over there? Nami's eyes widened in fear. No way, it's real? Chopper's medical side immediately began to mentally label all the bones visible to him, although he was shaking like a leaf. Zoro's eyes widened. This just wasn't natural. Sanji's expression was halfway between terrified and pissed. Terrified of the walking, talking skeleton, and pissed that this was the same crappy pervert who asked to see Vivi Schwann's underwear. He really does have an afro, Luffy said with zeal. He's a real skeleton with an real afro. This is so amazing. Think he'll join the crew if we ask? No, his crew shouted at him. The skeleton began walking through the crowd of bounty hunters, calmly swinging around a dark purple cane. If it concerned him to be walking through a group of bounty hunters, you couldn't see it on his skeletal face. Is that a skeleton? One hunter said. No way, it has to be a mask, another argued. Skeletons can't walk. They're dead. Hey, isn't Sister has all his tone dials? There you are, Zoro-san, the skeleton said conversationally, ignoring the bounty hunters. I've been looking all over for you. Imagine my surprise when I turned and you had simply vanished. It was quite a shock to my old heart. Well, not that I have a heart anymore. Yo-ho-ho-ho, skull joke. Roronoa rolled his eyes and resheathed all of his swords. He wasn't afraid of the skeleton in the least. If anything, he looked annoyed. "You're the one who got lost, not me. Where have you been all this time? Is anyone else with you?" "Sadly, no," the skeleton replied, coming to a stop in front of the bounty hunters. "I've been wandering the jungle in search of the crew in the Sunny. I did see Usopp-san, but he ran for some reason." The skeleton then noticed the rest of the Straw Hats. "Oh, you've already found everyone. What a relief. Though I don't see Robin-san or Frankie-san anywhere." Roronoa casually stepped in front of his younger self, hiding him from view. "Yeah, I may have to explain a few things. The situation's a lot more complicated than you know." "You don't say, Zoro-o-san," Luffy piped up. "Can we fight now? Just standing here is boring." The annoyed expression was back in full force on Roronoa's face. "There's no need to now." "What do you mean there's no need to?" Tattoos shouted. "We still need to collect your bounties, and we're more than ready to battle you all for them." "There's no need to because you gentlemen had already been defeated," the skeleton answered simply. "Eh?" Tattoos grunted. The mist surrounding them suddenly grew colder, sinking into everyone's pores and chilling them from the inside out. "This chill," Nami shivered. "I didn't sense a change in atmosphere. This isn't coming from wind or anything." The skeleton held up a sword and a section of his cane. The crew could now see they had been one and the same. But it begged the question, when did he draw it? Roronoa smirked. He can be such a show-off. Luffy and his crew looked between Roronoa and the afro creature before them. Just who or what was this new guy? The skeleton began resheathing his blade, speaking to the hunters. "You've lost because I've already cut you." Pastoral song. All of the bounty hunters stiffened. Frost began to form on their bodies. The sword slammed back into its sheath. Blizzard slash. Long cuts appeared out of nowhere on the hunters' bodies, but they carried no blood. Only thick ice came bursting from these wounds, and all at once, the hunters fell to the sandy ground. The skeleton spun his cane and planted the bottom of it into the ground. "The cold you feel is the chill of the underworld," he said icily. "Remember it well the next time you contemplate threatening my nakama." That last word echoed in the Straw Hat's ears. "His nakama? Nicely done, Brook," Roronoa said, walking up to the skeleton. "Personally, I wanted a crack at some of them, but whatever. Now, come on. You have a lot to catch up on."